She was invisible until the moment she became his. One spilled drink, one dangerous man, one offer that would either save her life or destroy it. Elena Voss thought Christmas Eve would be another shift watching other people's happiness through grease-stained windows. She was wrong. When Luca Moretti's eyes found hers across a crowded restaurant, her world didn't just change, it ignited. This is a story about desperation, power, and the thin line between salvation and destruction. Stay until the end to see how far one choice can take you. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The crystal chandelier above table 12 cost more than Elena's annual salary. She knew because she'd looked it up once during a slow shift, hating herself even as she typed the search into her cracked phone screen. $37,000 for something that just hung there, catching light, while she ran herself ragged for tips that barely covered the interest on her father's medical bills. Christmas Eve at Luminara was always brutal. The restaurant gleamed with old money and new fortunes, every table booked months in advance, every guest dressed like they were attending a wedding instead of just eating overpriced risotto. Elena's feet screamed in her cheap shoes, the ones with cardboard tucked inside to cover the holes in the soles, and her lower back had that hot, grinding ache that meant she'd be popping ibuprofen like candy when she finally got home, if she still had a home next week. The eviction notice was folded in her purse, creased from being opened and refolded too many times. 14 days. That's what the paper said in cold legal language. 14 days to come up with 3 months back rent plus late fees, or she and her father would be on the street. The same father who didn't even remember her name half the time, whose Alzheimer's medication cost more than their rent, who sometimes looked at her with such confused fear that she wanted to scream. Elena balanced the tray of champagne flutes with practiced precision, weaving through the crowd of beautiful people who didn't see her. That was the thing about being a server in a place like this. You became furniture, useful, necessary, but not quite human. The women in their designer dresses looked through her. The men's eyes skated past her face, her body registering nothing worth their attention. She'd learned to prefer it that way. "Excuse me." She placed a glass in front of a woman wearing what looked like a small fortune in diamonds. The woman didn't acknowledge her, just kept talking to her companion about their winter house in Aspen. Table 12 was in the corner, the private section reserved for VIPs who wanted to see and be seen but maintain the illusion of exclusivity. Elena had been warned about this party by Marcus, the head server who'd been at Luminara for 15 years and knew every power player in the city. "The Moretti reservation," he'd said during pre-shift, his voice dropping low. "Don't fuck it up. Don't stare. Don't ask questions. Serve, smile, disappear." Who are they? Marcus had given her a look that said she was either incredibly naive or dangerously stupid. People you don't want to know. People who own things, buildings, businesses, politicians. He paused. People. Elena understood. She'd grown up in this city long enough to know that some names carried weight that had nothing to do with legitimate business. The Morettis were one of those names whispered in certain circles, printed in business sections alongside charitable donations, but never quite investigated too closely. She approached table 12 with her service smile fixed in place, pleasant, neutral, forgettable. 6 men occupied the large table, all in expensive suits that fit like they'd been born in them. Conversation flowed in Italian and English, voices low and controlled. These weren't men who needed to shout to command attention. Elena began distributing the champagne, starting from the left as she'd been trained. She was 3 glasses in when she felt it, the weight of someone's stare, not the casual glance of a customer checking to make sure their drink was coming. This was focused, deliberate, the kind of attention that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She looked up without meaning to, breaking her own rule about making eye contact. The man at the head of the table was watching her with an intensity that stopped her breath. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that were almost black in the candlelight. He wasn't the loudest person at the table or the one commanding the conversation, but there was something about him that drew focus like gravity. Power sat on him comfortably, worn like a second skin. Luca Moretti. She knew without being told. His gaze held hers for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for her to feel stripped down to something raw and exposed, long enough for heat to crawl up her neck, long enough for her to forget where she was. Then his attention shifted back to his companion, as if she'd never existed, and Elena could breathe again. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the next glass. Stupid. She was being stupid. Men like that didn't actually see women like her. Whatever that moment had been, she'd imagined it. She finished distributing the champagne and turned to leave, her mind already on the next table, the next order, the endless cycle of the shift. Her foot caught on the edge of the ornate rug, the same rug she'd navigated hundreds of times before, and suddenly the world tilted sideways. The tray slipped from her grip. Everything after that happened in horrible slow motion. 6 champagne flutes tumbled through the air, crystal catching the light from that $37,000 chandelier. The champagne arced outward in perfect golden streams, gravity pulling it down toward the most expensive suits in the room, toward Luca Moretti. Elena watched her entire life end in the span of a heartbeat. The champagne hit his shoulder, his chest, soaking into fabric that probably cost more than her car. The glasses shattered against the marble floor with sounds like breaking bones, champagne and crystal exploding outward. The restaurant went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Cutlery stopped clinking against china. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade, as if the entire world had paused to witness her destruction. Elena couldn't move. She stood there frozen, champagne dripping from her empty tray onto her shoes, staring at the disaster she'd just created. Luca Moretti sat perfectly still, champagne darkening his shirt, shards of crystal glittering at his feet like tiny knives. His companions looked murderous. One of them, younger, with the same dark eyes but crueler, started to rise from his chair, his face twisted with rage. "You stupid—" "Dante." The name came from Luca, quiet but absolute. The younger man froze mid-motion, his mouth still open on whatever insult he'd been about to hurl. Luca stood slowly, brushing champagne off his jacket with casual movements that somehow made Elena's heart pound harder. He wasn't yelling, wasn't even looking angry. That was worse. The quiet ones were always worse. "I'm sorry." The words came out strangled, barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. She would pay for nothing. She had nothing, less than nothing. She had debt and an eviction notice and a father who couldn't remember her name. She had exactly $47 in her checking account and $17 in tips stuffed in her apron pocket. She couldn't even afford to pay for one of those glasses, let alone his suit. "I'm sorry," she said again, hating how her voice cracked. Luca stepped toward her, glass crunching under his expensive shoes. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, and there was something about the way he moved, controlled, predatory, that made her want to step back. But her feet wouldn't cooperate. She stood there like prey caught in headlights, waiting for the impact. He studied her face with the same intensity as before, and Elena had the irrational thought that he was cataloging her features, filing them away in some mental database. His eyes were so dark they looked black, and there was something ancient in them, something that had seen too much. "What's your name?" His voice was accented, Italian rolling underneath American English, smooth as smoke. "Elena." The word came out as a whisper. "Elena." He repeated it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "You're shaking." She was. Her whole body trembled, adrenaline and fear making her feel detached from herself. "I'm sorry about your suit. I'll find a way to pay for it. I don't know how, but I'll—" "How much do you owe?" The question was so unexpected that it took her several seconds to process it. "What? You have the look of someone drowning in debt. Medical bills, I'd guess, based on the way you're standing, protecting your lower back like it hurts, working double shifts, not eating enough." His eyes tracked down her frame, clinical and thorough. "How much?" Elena's face burned. Being invisible was one thing. Being seen this completely by a stranger was something else entirely, something that felt like violation and relief in equal measure. "I don't understand what— 20,000? 50? More? Why would you—" "Because I'm about to make you an offer." Luca pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, actual cloth, monogrammed, and wiped champagne off his wrist with unhurried movements. "And I need to know if you're desperate enough to accept it." Around them, the restaurant still held its collective breath. Elena could feel eyes on them, feel Marcus probably having a heart attack by the kitchen door, feel her entire career at Luminara circling the drain. She should walk away. should apologize again, collect her final paycheck, and disappear. Instead, she heard herself say, 86,000, give or take. Something flickered in Luca's expression. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation. Medical? My father. Alzheimer's. The good facilities cost. She stopped herself. Why was she telling him this? It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out. No, you won't. He said it as simple fact, not cruelty. You're 3 months behind on rent. Your car has a broken taillight you can't afford to fix. You're one emergency away from complete collapse. The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. How do you... I make it my business to understand desperation. It's useful. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. I have a proposition. 5 days of your time. $100,000. The number hit Elena like a physical blow. 100,000. Enough to pay off her father's medical bills. Enough to cover rent. Enough to breathe for the first time in 3 years. What kind of proposition? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The legal kind. Mostly. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. I need a wife for Christmas. You need money. Simple transaction. A wife. Elena said the word like she was trying to understand a foreign language. For 5 days, my family estate. You play the role convincingly, follow the rules, and walk away wealthy enough to solve your problems. That's insane. Yes, he agreed readily. But you're considering it anyway. He was right. She was standing in a puddle of champagne and broken crystal, her life falling apart in real time, and she was actually considering this stranger's insane offer. That's how desperate she'd become. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. Luca was quiet for a moment, and something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like recognition. Because you're invisible, because you know how to disappear in plain sight, and because, he paused, choosing his words, because you have the look of someone who understands survival. I don't know anything about your world. You'll learn, quickly. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena looked past him at his table, where the other men watched with expressions ranging from confusion to calculation. The younger one, Dante, looked at her like she was an insect he wanted to crush. What are the rules? You stay at the estate for 5 days, Christmas through New Year's. You act as my wife in front of my family. You don't ask questions. You don't leave the property without permission. You follow my instructions exactly. His eyes held hers. And you tell no one the truth, ever. That's it? That's it. It couldn't be that simple. Nothing in life was ever that simple. What's the catch? My family is complicated, dangerous if you're careless. They'll test you, push you, try to expose any weakness. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. If you break character, if you fail to convince them, the deal is void. And if I succeed? $100,000 wired to your account. Your father gets the care he needs. You get your life back. Your life back. The words echoed in Elena's head. Did she even have a life to get back to? Or just existence, just survival, just the endless grind of working and drowning and watching her father forget her 1 day at a time? I need to think about it. No, you don't. You need to decide right now. Luca's voice remained soft, but there was steel underneath. This offer expires when I walk out of this restaurant. You say yes, or you go back to drowning. Your choice. Elena looked down at the mess at her feet, the destroyed champagne, the broken glasses. She looked at her reflection in a shard of crystal, a tired woman with hollow eyes and a face she barely recognized anymore. She thought about the eviction notice in her purse, about her father asking where Mom was, even though she'd been dead for 6 years, about the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her default state. She thought about choice and how little of it she'd really had for a very long time. Yes. The word came out stronger than she expected. I'll do it. Luca extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. Elena stared at his offered hand for a heartbeat, then took it. His grip was firm, warm, and the moment their palms touched, she felt the world shift beneath her feet in a way that had nothing to do with champagne or broken crystal. Good. He released her hand and pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. A car will pick you up tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Pack for 5 days. Formal wear required. I'll have appropriate clothing sent to your address tonight. How do you know my address? That almost smile again. I told you, I make it my business to understand desperation. He turned back to his table, conversation resuming as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just bought 5 days of a stranger's life with a single offer. The other men looked at Elena with new interest now, not as a clumsy server, but as something else, something that belonged to Luca Moretti. Marcus appeared at her elbow, his face pale. What the hell just happened? Elena bent down and started picking up shards of crystal, her hands shaking. I have no idea, but that was a lie. She knew exactly what had happened. She'd just sold herself to the devil. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to collect her payment. Oh, the rest of the shift passed in a blur. Marcus didn't fire her, which was its own kind of miracle, but he kept giving her looks that said he was trying to figure out what kind of arrangement she'd just made with Luca Moretti. Elena didn't have good answers. She barely understood it herself. She finished her tables on autopilot, her mind spinning through the implications of what she'd agreed to. 5 days, $100,000. Play the role of Luca Moretti's wife in front of his family. Don't ask questions. Don't break character. Simple. Insane. Possibly illegal. Definitely dangerous. By the time she clocked out at midnight, her feet were numb and her head was pounding. She changed out of her uniform in the staff bathroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. Same tired eyes, same pale skin stretched too tight over sharp cheekbones. Same woman she'd been this morning. Except now, she was a woman who'd made a deal with a man who knew too much about her, who'd looked at her like he could see straight through to her bones, who'd offered salvation with strings she couldn't even begin to count. Elena's phone buzzed as she walked to her car, the 15-year-old Honda with the broken tail light that Luca had somehow known about. A text from an unknown number. Clothing will arrive at 11 p.m. Car at 6 a.m. Don't be late. L. She stared at the message. 11 p.m. was in less than 20 minutes. How had he gotten her number? How did he know her address? The rational part of her brain screamed that this was wrong, that she should back out now, that nothing good could come from this. The desperate part, the part that had been drowning for 3 years, whispered that she didn't have a choice. Her apartment was dark when she arrived. Just one light on in the living room where her father would be sleeping in his recliner, the TV playing old westerns he'd watched 1,000 times before he forgot their plots. Elena closed the door quietly, dropping her purse and keys on the counter. Dad? She kept her voice soft, not wanting to startle him. He stirred in the chair, blinking at her with confusion that stabbed through her chest every single time. Who? Oh. Elena. Sorry, sweetheart. Must have dozed off. These were his good moments, when he remembered. They were getting rarer. It's late. You should get to bed. Big shift? He struggled to push himself up from the chair, and Elena moved to help him, supporting his weight, even though her back screamed in protest. Yeah, big shift. She got him settled in bed, made sure he'd taken his evening medication, and stood in his doorway watching him drift off to sleep. He looked small in the bed, diminished by the disease eating away at his memories, at everything that made him who he was. This was why she'd said yes, not for herself, for him. So he could spend whatever time he had left in a good facility with proper care, with dignity, with something better than this apartment that smelled like old coffee and defeat. The doorbell rang at exactly 11 p.m. Elena opened it to find a delivery man holding 3 large garment bags and a sleek black box. Miss Voss? Yes? Delivery from Mr. Moretti. I'll need you to sign here. She signed on autopilot, accepting the packages and closing the door behind him. The garment bags were heavy, high-quality fabric rustling inside. The black box had a card on top, her name written in sharp, masculine handwriting. She opened the card. Everything you need, dressed to impress. L. Inside the box were shoes. 3 pairs, all in her exact size. How did he know her shoe size? Below the shoes were accessories, jewelry that looked real enough to make her nervous, a small clutch purse, even makeup from brands she'd only seen in magazine advertisements. The garment bags revealed dresses that belonged in a different life. Evening gowns, cocktail dresses, a cashmere coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything in her size. Everything perfectly coordinated. Elena ran her fingers over the fabric of a midnight blue dress, silk so fine it felt like water. This wasn't clothing meant to help her blend in. This was armor. This was transformation. This was Luca Moretti proving he could remake her into whatever he needed. She should have been scared, should have been insulted, should have been a lot of things. Instead, she pulled out her phone and texted the number he'd used earlier. "How did you know my sizes?" The response came within seconds. "I make it my business to know everything. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early." Elena looked at the dresses spread across her bed, at the shoes lined up like soldiers, at the jewelry that caught the dim light from her lamp. She looked at her reflection in the window, still tired, still worn down, but now with something else in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Or possibility. Or both. She set an alarm for 5 a.m. and lay down in her bed fully dressed, too wired to sleep, too exhausted not to. Her mind spun through scenarios, through potential disasters, through all the ways this could go wrong. But underneath the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Dangerous, foolish, desperate hope. The alarm pulled Elena from dreams of champagne and dark eyes at 5 a.m. She showered quickly, the hot water a luxury she couldn't really afford but took anyway, washing away the restaurant smell that clung to her skin. She stared at the clothing options laid out on her bed, finally settling on something understated, black slacks and a cream sweater that looked expensive without screaming it. The jewelry stayed in the box. The evening gowns stayed in the bags. This was just a car ride. Save the armor for when she actually needed it. Her father was still asleep when she left a note on the kitchen counter. "Dad, got a last-minute catering job out of town. We'll be back in 5 days. Mrs. Chen from next door will check on you. Your pills are organized in the container. I love you. Elena." It wasn't entirely a lie. She was working, just not the kind of work that came with a W-2. The black car pulled up at exactly 6 a.m. Not a taxi or an Uber. An actual town car with tinted windows and a driver in a suit. He opened the door for her without speaking, and Elena slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire car. The driver pulled away from her apartment building, and Elena watched her neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. The cracked sidewalks, the corner store with bars on the windows, the playground where the swings were always broken. Her whole life lived in these few blocks, small and struggling and real. She was leaving it for something else entirely. The drive took 40 minutes, the city gradually giving way to suburbs, then to countryside, then to something that could only be called estates. The properties got larger, the walls got higher, and the gates got more imposing. Old money territory. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. They turned down a private road lined with trees, branches overhead creating a tunnel of winter bare wood. At the end of the drive sat a house that made Elena's breath catch. Calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. The Moretti estate sprawled across the landscape, all stone and glass and architectural presence. Wings extended from the main building like arms, enclosing gardens and courtyards. Windows glittered in the morning sun. Somewhere in the distance, Elena could see what looked like a separate guest house. This was where she'd be spending the next 5 days. Playing wife to a man she'd met for 30 seconds before dousing him in champagne. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. The driver opened her door, and Elena stepped out onto gravel that crunched expensively under her feet. The front door opened before she could knock, revealing a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Miss Voss? I'm Maria. I manage the household." Her accent was Italian, her expression neutral. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you, this way." Elena followed her through an entrance hall that could have swallowed her entire apartment. Marble floors, oil paintings that looked original, a staircase that swept upward in a curve that belonged in movies, not real life. Maria led her through a maze of hallways, each more impressive than the last, finally stopping at a door near the back of the house. She knocked once, waited for a muffled response, then opened it. "Miss Voss, sir." The room beyond was an office. Dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with actual books. Luca sat behind a massive desk, reading something on his laptop. He looked up as Elena entered, and she was struck again by the intensity of his attention. "Thank you, Maria. That will be all." The door closed behind Elena with a soft click, leaving her alone with the man who'd bought 5 days of her life. "You're early," Luca said, rising from his chair. He wore casual clothes this morning, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, but they fit him like formal wear, expensive and deliberate. You said not to be late. I said 6. It's 5:57. Is there a difference? That almost smile again. We'll find out. Coffee? Please. He poured from a carafe on a side table, handing her a cup that was warm and heavy in her hands. Real china. Real coffee that smelled like it cost more per pound than she made in a day. Sit. He gestured to a leather chair facing his desk. Elena sat, cradling the coffee cup like a shield. Luca returned to his seat, studying her with that clinical attention that made her want to squirm. You look better than last night. That's not exactly a high bar. True. He leaned back in his chair. We need to establish some ground rules before my family arrives. I thought you already gave me the rules. Don't ask questions. Don't leave. Follow instructions. Those were the basic parameters. Now we get specific. He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer, sliding it across to her. This is everything you need to know about Elena Moretti. She opened it to find what looked like a dossier. Her life. Rewritten. Elena Moretti? My wife. As of 6 months ago, private ceremony, no guests. You were an art gallery manager I met at a charity auction. We had a whirlwind romance. Very passionate, very private. I don't like sharing personal details with my family, so the sparse information makes sense. Elena scanned the papers, seeing her own history twisted into something new. You expect me to memorize all this? You have until tomorrow afternoon when my family arrives for Christmas dinner. 24 hours should be sufficient. Should be? You said you needed this money. Prove you're willing to work for it. The words stung, but they weren't wrong. Elena set down her coffee cup and started reading. Birth date changed by 2 years. Hometown shifted to Portland instead of the actual suburb 40 minutes away. Parents listed as deceased, close to true, since her mother was dead and her father might as well be, given his condition. Why art gallery manager? Because it's believable. You have an eye for detail. You're observant. You know how to blend into wealthy spaces. He paused. And because my family will dismiss it as frivolous enough that you won't threaten them. Threaten them how? Any woman I marry is a potential threat to inheritance, to power structures, to the careful balance my family maintains. If they think you're decorative and harmless, they'll be less likely to dig too deep. Elena looked up from the papers. You keep saying family like it's a minefield. Because it is. Luca's expression went flat. My father built this empire from nothing. My mother is complicated. My brother Dante thinks he should be running things instead of me. My sister collects secrets like other people collect art. And my uncle has his fingers in business ventures that would make the SEC very interested. And you want me to convince these people I'm your wife? I want you to survive 5 days without getting eaten alive. The convincing part is secondary. That's reassuring. It's honest. He stood, moving around the desk to lean against it, closer now. My family isn't normal, Elena. They're ambitious, ruthless, and constantly testing for weakness. You show them fear, they'll destroy you. You show them defiance, they'll destroy you differently. You need to find the line in between. And what about you? The question came out before she could stop it. What happens if I show you fear or defiance? Luca was quiet for a moment, something unreadable passing through his expression. I'm not the one you need to worry about. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. He pushed away from the desk, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. You'll have your own room, of course. We'll maintain appearances in public, but you'll have privacy when needed. Maria will show you the layout of the house. Memorize it. Know where the exits are. Why would I need to know where the exits are? Because I'm trying to keep you alive, and that means being prepared. He turned back to her. My family arrives tomorrow at 4 p.m. Between now and then, you'll learn everything in that folder. You'll learn the basic layout of this house, and you'll learn how to act like you belong here. That's a lot for 24 hours. Then you should probably stop wasting time asking questions. Elena stood, the folder clutched in her hands. You're not exactly making this sound appealing. It's not meant to be appealing. It's meant to be honest. Luca crossed his arms. You want out? Say the word. I'll have the driver take you home. No hard feelings. He was testing her. She could see it in the way he watched her, waiting to see if she'd crack, if she'd run, if she'd prove she wasn't capable of handling this. Elena thought about her apartment, about her father's confused face, about the eviction notice and the debt and the endless, grinding weight of just trying to survive. She thought about the number in that folder, $100,000. She met Luca's eyes and didn't look away. "Where's my room?" Something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe, or just acknowledgement. "Maria will show you. We'll have dinner tonight at 7. Practice." "Practice for what?" "For looking like you actually want to be in the same room as me." He moved past her toward the door. "Right now you look like you're about to bolt. That won't sell." "Maybe because I am about to bolt." "But you won't." He said it with complete certainty, and Elena hated that he was right. "Because you need this. And because somewhere under all that fear, you're curious." "About what?" Luca opened the door, pausing to look back at her. "About whether you can pull this off. About whether you're stronger than you think you are." His eyes held hers. "About me." He was gone before she could formulate a response, leaving her standing in his office with a folder full of lies and a coffee cup that was going cold in her hands. Elena looked down at the papers, at the fictional life she was supposed to inhabit. Elena Moretti. Wife. Art gallery manager. Woman who belonged in a world of marble floors and oil paintings and men with dangerous eyes. She had 24 hours to become someone else. The question was whether she'd still recognize herself when she looked in the mirror. Maria materialized in the hallway outside Luca's office like she'd been waiting there the whole time. Probably had been. Elena was starting to understand that nothing in this house happened without someone knowing about it. "This way, Miss Voss." "Elena is fine." Maria's expression didn't change. "This way, Mrs. Moretti." The correction landed like a slap, a reminder that Elena Voss didn't exist here anymore. She was playing a role, and Maria was the first person testing whether she could handle it. They climbed the grand staircase to the second floor, Maria's sensible shoes clicking against marble in a rhythm that Elena tried to match and couldn't quite manage. The hallway stretched in both directions, doors lining both sides like secrets waiting to be opened. "The master suite is there." Maria gestured to a set of double doors at the far end. "Mr. Moretti's private space. You are not to enter without invitation." You thought you'd be sharing a room. You're not. Appearances matter during family gatherings, but Mr. Moretti values his privacy." She opened a door 3 down from the master suite. "This is yours." The room beyond was bigger than Elena's entire apartment. A king bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that looked too pristine to actually sleep on. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. There was a sitting area with a couch and chairs, a desk, a wardrobe that could have housed a small family. The garment bags from last night hung in the closet, already unpacked. The shoes were lined up below them. On the dresser sat the jewelry box, along with other items Elena hadn't sent: perfume, skincare products, even a laptop. "Everything you need is here. If something is missing, use the phone on the desk to call the main line. Breakfast is served at 8, lunch at 1, dinner at 7. Mr. Moretti expects punctuality." Does Mr. Moretti expect a lot of things? Maria's mouth almost twitched into a smile. Almost. Mr. Moretti expects perfection. Whether he gets it remains to be seen. She left before Elena could respond, the door closing with a soft click that sounded too much like a trap being sprung. Elena stood in the middle of the room, folder still clutched in her hands, trying to process the sudden shift in her reality. 24 hours ago, she'd been serving champagne to people who didn't see her. Now she was standing in a room that cost more to furnish than she'd earned in a decade, preparing to pretend to be married to a man who saw her too clearly. She opened the folder again, forcing herself to focus. Birth date, education history, career trajectory, all fiction, all crafted to create a believable Elena Moretti. The details were thorough, almost obsessive. Luca had thought of everything, down to the name of the gallery where she supposedly worked and the college she'd supposedly attended. Elena pulled out her phone and started making notes, creating flashcards in a memo app. She had to memorize this perfectly. One slip, one contradiction, and the whole thing would collapse. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "How's Dad doing? Checked on him this morning. He's fine." Elena stared at the message, ice running through her veins. Luca had someone checking on her father, which meant he knew where her father was, had access to him, could reach him any time he wanted. She typed back, "You're having him watched?" The response came immediately. "I'm having him cared for. There's a difference. I didn't ask for that. You didn't ask for a lot of things. Doesn't mean you don't need them." Elena wanted to throw the phone across the room, wanted to march downstairs and demand Luca explain exactly what kind of game he was playing. But that would mean admitting he'd gotten under her skin, and she had a feeling that's exactly what he wanted. Instead, she put the phone down and went back to studying. By noon, Elena had memorized most of the basic facts. By 2, she'd walked the main floor 3 times, mapping out the layout in her head. Library, dining room, sitting room, kitchen that was twice the size of any restaurant kitchen she'd worked in, and hallways that led to places Maria had steered her away from with firm politeness. She found Luca in the library at 3, standing by the window with a drink in his hand, staring out at the gardens like they held answers to questions Elena couldn't hear. "I have questions about the story." He didn't turn around. "What kind of questions?" "How we met. You said charity auction, but which one? What was being auctioned? What did you buy?" "Does it matter?" "It matters if your family asks and we give different answers." Luca turned then, studying her with that unnerving focus. Metropolitan Arts Gala, 6 months ago. They were auctioning a sculpture, bronze, modern piece, something pretentious that I didn't actually want. You were managing the display, explaining the artist's vision to some hedge fund manager who thought buying art made him cultured. And you were listening. I was bored. You were more interesting than the sculpture. He took a sip of his drink. "I bought it anyway. 30,000 for something I gave away a week later. But I got your number, so it wasn't a complete waste." The story flowed too easily, too naturally, like he'd been rehearsing it, or like it was partially true. "What else?" Luca asked. "The wedding. 6 months ago, private ceremony, no guests." "Where?" "City Hall, Tuesday afternoon. I hate spectacle. You wanted simple. We compromised on practical." "Romantic." "We're not trying to convince anyone this is a love story. We're convincing them it's real. There's a difference." He set down his drink. "Real marriages aren't fairy tales. They're contracts, negotiations. 2 people deciding the benefits outweigh the costs. Is that what yours is? This isn't real, remember?" "Right." Elena looked down at the folder in her hands. "What about your family? What do they know about me?" "Nothing. I don't share personal information with them if I can avoid it. The fact that I got married without telling them first is believable because I've done similar things before." "Like what?" "Like none of your business." The words came out sharp, a clear boundary being drawn. "You need to know your story, not mine. If I'm supposed to be your wife, you're supposed to be convincing enough that my family doesn't ask too many questions. That's all." Luca moved to the bar cart, pouring another drink. "You want one? It's 3 in the afternoon. You're about to have dinner with me. Trust me, you'll want one." Elena accepted the glass, whiskey burning down her throat in a way that felt grounding. "Why are we doing this? The practice dinner?" "Because you need to learn how to sit across from me without looking like you're planning escape routes. Because we need to establish patterns of behavior that look natural. Because—" He stopped, something shifting in his expression. "Because my family reads people the way sharks smell blood in water. If we don't look comfortable together, they'll know something's wrong. So we're building chemistry. We're building tolerance. Chemistry would imply attraction." The words stung more than they should have. Elena set her glass down harder than necessary. "I can handle sitting across from you for a meal. Can you handle touching me?" "What?" Luca crossed the space between them, close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Can you handle it when I put my hand on your back in front of my mother? When I touch your shoulder during conversation? When I stand too close because married couples don't maintain professional distance?" Elena's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. "I've worked in restaurants for years. I know how to handle men in my personal space. This isn't a drunk customer hitting on you. This is supposed to be your husband, someone you chose, someone you want near you." His hand came up slowly, fingers brushing her jawline. "Can you handle that without flinching?" She didn't flinch, didn't step back, just held his gaze while his thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, touched light enough to be almost gentle but deliberate enough to prove his point. "See? You're holding your breath. You're tense. You look like someone being touched without permission, not like someone comfortable with their husband's affection. Maybe I'm just not a very affectionate person. Then we need to fix that in the next... He checked his watch. 3.5 hours. He stepped back, breaking contact, and Elena could breathe again. She hated that he was right. Hated that she'd frozen up the second he'd touched her, that her body had betrayed exactly how uncomfortable she was. How do you suggest we fix it? The question came out more challenging than she intended. Luca's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. Practice. Same way you fix anything. The next 3 hours were among the strangest of Elena's life. Luca made her sit next to him on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. Made her tolerate his hand on her knee during conversation. Made her laugh at a story he told, something about a disastrous business trip to Milan, until the tension in her shoulders started to ease. Better, he said at one point, his hand resting casually on the back of her neck. You're not vibrating with panic anymore. I don't vibrate. You absolutely do, like a rabbit that knows there's a fox nearby. His fingers pressed gently against the knot of tension at the base of her skull. Relax, I'm not going to hurt you. You're a complete stranger who knows too much about my life and has me trapped in his house playing pretend. Forgiveness me for not being relaxed. Fair point. But he didn't move his hand, and after a moment, Elena found herself leaning into the touch, despite her better judgment. His fingers knew exactly where to press, working out tension she'd been carrying for years. Where did you learn to do that? I pay attention to what people need. His voice was closer now, warm against her ear. And you need to stop carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Easy to say when you're not drowning in debt. I've been drowning in other things. Different water, same struggle. Elena turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. Like what? Like expectations, legacy. The weight of building an empire my father started with blood and sweat, while everyone watches to see if I'm worthy. His hand dropped from her neck. Different problems than yours. But don't pretend I don't understand pressure. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her, and it shifted something in Elena's perception. He wasn't just a wealthy man buying her time. He was someone trapped in his own way, playing a role just like she was. Why do you need a fake wife for Christmas? Because my family thinks I'm incapable of maintaining a relationship. Because my mother keeps introducing me to appropriate women from appropriate families. Because my father is dying and wants to see me settled before he goes. Luca's expression went carefully blank. A wife solves multiple problems at once. Your father is dying? Lung cancer. 6 months, maybe a year. He said it clinically, like discussing a business merger. This is likely his last Christmas, hence the family gathering, hence the urgency. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's not a good man. He just happens to be my father. Luca stood, straightening his shirt. Dinner in 20 minutes. Wear the blue dress. Which blue dress? The midnight one. It'll photograph well. Photograph? My mother will want pictures. She always does. He paused at the door. And Elena? Try to look like you don't hate me. It'll make this easier for both of us. Elena changed into the midnight blue dress, the silk cool against her skin. It fit perfectly, hugging curves she usually hid under baggy work clothes. The neckline was lower than she'd normally choose, the slit higher. But when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This woman looked expensive, put together, like someone who belonged at a Moretti family dinner, like Elena Moretti instead of Elena Voss. She made her way downstairs at exactly 7, following the sound of classical music to the dining room. The table was set for 2, candles already lit, wine already poured. Luca stood by the window in a dark suit, looking every inch the wealthy heir. He turned when she entered, and something flickered in his expression, too quick for her to identify, but there nonetheless. You clean up well. You paid for it. I'd hope so. The dress is just fabric. You're the one making it work. He pulled out a chair for her. Sit. Elena sat, hyper-aware of the formality of it all. The china was probably worth more than her car. The silverware was actual silver. Even the napkins felt expensive. Luca took the seat across from her, raising his wine glass. To convincing performances. To survival. That too. He took a sip, watching her over the rim. Tell me something true. What? Something true about Elena Voss, not Elena Moretti. Something not in the folder. Elena's fingers tightened on her wine glass. Why? Because I need to know who I'm working with, because the best lies contain truth. Because, he set down his glass, because I'm curious. You're always curious. It's unsettling. Is that your true thing? No. Elena took a drink, the wine smooth and probably ridiculously expensive. True thing. I wanted to be a teacher. Before everything fell apart with my dad, before the medical bills, I was studying education, elementary school. I thought I could make a difference. Why didn't you? Because tuition costs money, because my father needed care, because wanting something doesn't make it possible. She met his eyes. Because life doesn't care about your plans. No, Luca agreed quietly. It doesn't. Maria appeared with the first course, something that looked too artistic to eat. Elena picked up her fork, trying to remember which utensil went with which course. Luca noticed her hesitation. Start from the outside, work your way in, and stop overthinking it. My family isn't going to judge you on fork selection. What will they judge me on? Everything else. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. My mother will judge whether you're refined enough. My father will judge whether you're strong enough. Dante will judge whether you're a threat. And my sister Isabella will judge whether you're hiding something. That's a lot of judgment. Welcome to the Moretti family Christmas. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the clink of silverware against china the only sound. Elena found herself studying Luca when he wasn't looking, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands moved with unconscious grace, the tension he carried in his shoulders despite his casual posture. Your turn, she said finally. Tell me something true. About what? About you. About Luca Moretti, not the character you play for your family. He was quiet long enough that Elena thought he might refuse. Then, I hate this house. Always have. It's beautiful, and it's a prison, and I can't escape it because it's what my father built. His legacy, my responsibility. Why not just leave? Because leaving would mean abandoning everything he worked for. Because my brother would destroy it within a year. Because he stopped, something raw crossing his face. Because I don't know who I am without it. The honesty in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the controlled, calculating man who'd made her an offer in a restaurant. This was someone tired, trapped, uncertain, human. That's the thing about cages, Elena said softly. Sometimes the locks are on the inside. Luca looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena felt the air shift between them. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. Two people trapped in different ways, both trying to survive the weight of circumstances they hadn't chosen. You're more insightful than you pretend to be. You're more human than you pretend to be. His mouth curved into something that was almost a real smile. Don't tell my family. It would ruin my reputation. They finished dinner talking about safer things. The house, the gardens, the logistics of tomorrow. But something had shifted. Some wall had lowered just slightly, and when Luca walked her back to her room at the end of the night, his hand resting on her lower back felt less like performance and more like choice. Get some sleep, he said at her door. Tomorrow is going to be brutal. More brutal than today? Today was preparation. Tomorrow is war. He stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets. And Elena? Thank you. For what? For not running. For being stronger than I expected. He turned to leave, then paused. For making this almost bearable. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing down the hallway to his own room, leaving Elena standing in her doorway trying to figure out what had just happened. She'd come here for money, for survival, for her father. But somewhere between champagne and confession, between practiced touches and honest admissions, the lines had started to blur. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, still wearing the midnight blue dress, still feeling the ghost of Luca's hand on her back. Tomorrow, his family would arrive. Tomorrow, the real performance would begin. Tonight, she had to figure out how to play a role that was starting to feel less like fiction and more like possibility. She changed into pajamas, washed her face, and climbed into the too expensive bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept replaying the evening, Luca's fingers on her jaw, his admission about the house, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than just a hired actress. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from the same unknown number as before. Dad settled for the night. Nurse says he had a good day. Sleep well. L. Elena stared at the message. Luca had a nurse with her father. Not just someone checking in, but actual professional care. The kind she couldn't afford. The kind that would keep him safe and comfortable while she was here playing house with a stranger. She should be angry about the invasion. Should be furious that Luca had taken control of something so personal without asking. Instead, she felt the tight knot in her chest loosen just slightly. Her father was safe. For the first time in years, she could breathe without worrying whether he'd remembered his medication or wandered out of the apartment or hurt himself while she wasn't there. Elena typed back, "Thank you." The response came immediately. "You're welcome. Now sleep. You'll need it." She put the phone down and closed her eyes, and this time, sleep came easier than it had in months. The next day arrived with winter sunlight streaming through the windows and Maria knocking on her door at 7:30 with coffee and a reminder that breakfast would be served in 30 minutes. Elena showered, dressed in casual clothes that still somehow looked expensive, and made her way downstairs. She found Luca in the breakfast room, reading a newspaper and drinking espresso like he'd stepped out of some Italian film. "Morning." He looked up, taking in her appearance with a quick scan. "You slept. Was I not supposed to?" Most people don't sleep well their first night in strange places, especially not when they're about to meet the family. He folded the newspaper. "You're either very brave or very good at compartmentalizing. Maybe I'm just exhausted enough that my body gave up caring. Also possible." He gestured to the buffet along the wall. "Eat. You'll need energy." Elena filled a plate with fruit and pastries, her stomach too nervous for anything heavier. She sat across from Luca, trying to remember how to make conversation that felt natural instead of scripted. "What time do they arrive?" 4. "My parents will come first, then Dante and Isabella within the hour. We'll have drinks, then dinner at 7. He set down his espresso cup. "You'll sit next to me. If the conversation turns to business, you look interested but don't contribute. If my mother asks about wedding plans we didn't have, you let me handle it. If Dante tries to corner you alone, you stay in public spaces." Why would Dante corner me? Because he's going to test whether you're real, whether I actually care about you, whether you're worth the disruption you represent. Luca's expression went hard. He'll push boundaries, make you uncomfortable, try to get a reaction. Don't give him one. And if he doesn't stop, then I'll handle it. The promise in his voice was sharp enough to cut. But it won't come to that if you follow the rules. They spent the morning rehearsing, practicing how they'd stand together, how they'd interact during conversation, how to make casual touches look natural. Luca was thorough, almost obsessive, correcting her posture and her responses until Elena wanted to scream. "You're standing too far away. We're supposed to be married, not business associates." "I'm standing at a normal distance. For strangers, not for us." He pulled her closer, his hand settling on her hip. "This is normal distance. Get used to it." Elena tried to relax into his proximity, but her body kept tensing up. Luca sighed, his free hand coming up to tilt her chin so she had to look at him. "What are you afraid of?" "I'm not afraid." "You're terrified. I can feel it. Talk to me." "You want me to talk about being afraid while you're touching me? That seems counterproductive." "Elena," her name in his mouth, accent curling around the syllables. "What is it?" She closed her eyes, trying to find words for the knot in her chest. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to pretend to be comfortable with someone I barely know. I don't know how to make it look real when it's not." "Then stop trying to make it look real." Luca's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Just be here, right now, with me." Elena opened her eyes to find him closer than before, his face inches from hers, his expression unreadable. "That's not helpful advice. It's the only advice I have." His hand slid from her hip to the small of her back, pulling her incrementally closer. "We can't fake chemistry we don't have, but we can be honest about what we do have." "Which is what?" "An arrangement. Mutual need. Respect, maybe, if we're being generous." His eyes searched hers. "And something else. Something neither of us expected." "What?" Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Recognition." Luca's forehead almost touched hers, close enough that she could feel his breath. "We're both trapped, both playing roles, both pretending to be stronger than we are. And maybe that's enough." His mouth was so close, and Elena had the wild thought that he might kiss her, that this might cross from performance into something else entirely. But instead, he stepped back, breaking the moment. Better. That looked almost real. Elena's heart was still racing, but she forced her voice steady. Was that part of the rehearsal? All of it is rehearsal. Until it's not. He checked his watch. 2 hours until they arrive. Go get ready. Wear the green dress. You really like controlling what I wear. I like controlling variables. The dress is a variable. He headed toward the door, then paused. And Elena? Whatever happens today, remember, you're not alone in this. He left her standing in the breakfast room, pulse still hammering, skin still warm where he'd touched her, trying to figure out whether that had been comfort or manipulation or some combination of both. Elena went upstairs and found the green dress, emerald silk that brought out the color in her eyes. She did her makeup carefully, using the expensive products Luca had provided, transforming herself into someone who could believably be a Moretti. At 3:30, there was a knock on her door. Maria stood in the hallway with a small box. From Mr. Moretti. Inside was a ring, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum, that caught the light like captured stars. There was a note in Luca's handwriting. A wife should have a ring. Wear it on your left hand. Don't lose it. It's real. Elena slipped it on, the weight unfamiliar on her finger. It fit perfectly, of course, because Luca knew everything, controlled everything, anticipated everything. She made her way downstairs at 3:50 to find Luca waiting in the entrance hall, dressed in a dark suit that made him look dangerous and elegant in equal measure. He turned when she approached, his eyes tracking over her with an intensity that made her feel naked, despite being fully clothed. Perfect. He extended his hand. Ready? Elena took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the solidness of him beside her. No. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He pulled her closer, his arm sliding around her waist in a possessive gesture that looked completely natural. Just remember, you're Elena Moretti. You chose this. You chose me. You belong here. I don't believe any of that. Then lie better. His fingers tightened on her waist. Because they're here. Through the windows, Elena could see a black car pulling up the drive. Her heart kicked into overdrive, panic clawing up her throat. Breathe, Luca murmured against her ear. You've survived worse than this. Have I? You're still standing, aren't you? He pressed a kiss to her temple, casual and claiming. That makes you stronger than most people who walk through these doors. The car stopped. The driver opened the door, and Elena's carefully constructed fiction was about to meet reality. The woman who emerged from the car wore her wealth like armor. Valentina Moretti was smaller than Elena expected, but she carried herself like someone who'd never been told no in her life. Her hair was perfect, her suit was perfect. Even the way she stepped onto the gravel without stumbling in heels was perfect. Behind her came a man who looked like Luca in 30 years. Same sharp features, same dark eyes, but harder somehow. Weathered by decades of whatever it took to build an empire from nothing. Marco Moretti moved slower than his wife, and Elena could see the illness in the careful way he navigated the steps. Luca's hand tightened on her waist, the only sign he was affected by his parents' arrival. Smile, not too big. You're meeting them, not auditioning. Elena managed something between pleasant and reserved, hoping it read as appropriate. Valentina's eyes locked onto her immediately, sharp and assessing, taking in every detail from the dress to the ring to the way Elena stood tucked against Luca's side. Luca. Valentina's voice carried the weight of expensive education and old country roots. You didn't mention you'd have company for Christmas. I mentioned I was bringing my wife. That's not company, Mama. That's family. The word wife landed like a bomb in the space between them. Valentina's perfectly composed face cracked for just a second. Shock, maybe fury, before smoothing back into practiced neutrality. Marco's expression didn't change at all, but his eyes sharpened on Elena with new interest. Your wife. Valentina repeated the words like she was tasting something bitter. How interesting. And when exactly did this happen? 6 months ago. Luca's voice held no apology, no explanation, just fact. City Hall, simple ceremony. Without your family. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Without spectacle. Elena and I preferred privacy. Valentina's gaze swung to Elena, cold enough to freeze blood. Elena. How lovely. And what is your family name? This was it, the first test. Elena forced herself to meet Valentina's eyes without flinching. Voss, my parents passed several years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. The words were automatic, empty of real sympathy. And what do you do, Elena Voss? Moretti, Luca corrected quietly. She's Elena Moretti now. Something flashed in Valentina's eyes at the correction, but she smiled with practiced grace. Of course. Elena Moretti. What do you do? I manage an art gallery. Contemporary pieces, mostly. We focus on emerging artists. How charming! The dismissal in Valentina's voice was subtle but unmistakable. And which gallery would that be? Elena recited the name from the folder, grateful for the hours of memorization. Luminara Arts, in the financial district. I don't believe I've heard of it. It's boutique. We prefer exclusivity over exposure. Luca's fingers pressed against her waist. Approval or warning, Elena couldn't tell. But she'd passed the first round, and Valentina's attention shifted to her son with renewed intensity. We should speak, privately. Later. Luca's refusal was polite but absolute. Let's get you settled first. Maria has your rooms prepared. Marco finally spoke, his voice rough like gravel. The girl has a spine. That's something. The girl has a name, Papa. So she does. Marco studied Elena with the same unsettling intensity as his son. Welcome to the family, Elena Moretti. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into. I'm learning. That almost smile from Marco, there and gone. Good answer. Maria materialized to escort Valentina and Marco inside, and the moment they disappeared into the house, Elena felt like she could breathe again. Her hands were shaking. Luca noticed, covering them with his own. You did well. Your mother hates me. My mother hates everyone. Don't take it personally. He led her back inside, his hand never leaving her waist. She'll come around once she realizes you're not going anywhere. What if I don't want to come around? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Luca stopped in the hallway, turning her to face him. 1 hour until Dante and Isabella arrive. Use that time to breathe. You've made it through the first wave. How many waves are there? Too many to count. He touched her face briefly, thumb brushing her cheekbone. But you're still standing. Elena escaped to her room, closing the door and leaning against it like she could hold back the weight of the Moretti family through sheer force of will. Her phone buzzed, a text from Luca. You're doing better than I expected. Keep it up. She didn't know whether to be reassured or insulted. She settled for changing her shoes, the heels were killing her feet, and trying to prepare herself for round 2. Dante and Isabella arrived together at exactly 5, and Elena understood immediately why Luca had warned her about his brother. Dante had the same dark eyes, the same sharp features, but where Luca carried his power with control, Dante wore his like a weapon he couldn't wait to use. He was younger, maybe late 20s, and handsome in a way that knew it. Isabella was different, quieter. She hung back while Dante strode in like he owned the place, her eyes taking in everything without seeming to look directly at anything. Mid-30s, elegant in a way that seemed effortless, and watching Elena with the kind of attention that made her want to check whether her dress was on properly. So this is the mysterious wife. Dante's voice dripped skepticism as he circled Elena like she was a painting he was considering buying. Have to say, brother, I didn't think you had it in you. Marriage seemed too permanent for your taste. People change. Luca's arm slid around Elena's shoulders, casual and possessive. Elena, this is my brother Dante and my sister Isabella. Pleasure to meet you both. Is it? Dante moved closer, invading her space deliberately. Because you look terrified. Not exactly the face of marital bliss. Dante. Luca's voice carried a warning. What? I'm just getting to know my new sister-in-law. That's allowed, isn't it? But Dante stepped back, his smile sharp. 6 months married, and we're only meeting you now. You can understand why that seems suspicious. Luca values privacy. I respect that. How convenient. Dante accepted a drink from Maria, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. Tell me, how did you two meet? I'm dying to hear the love story. Elena recited the rehearsed narrative, the gala, the sculpture, the conversation that led to a whirlwind romance. She'd practiced it enough that the words came out smooth, believable. But Dante listened with a smile that said he was cataloging every detail, looking for cracks. Isabella finally spoke, her voice softer than her brother's, but no less sharp. Luminara Arts. I know that gallery. Marcus Chen runs it, doesn't he? Elena's heart stuttered. The folder hadn't mentioned a name for the gallery owner. She had no idea if Marcus Chen was real or fiction, whether agreeing would expose her or save her. He does, she said, praying it was the right answer. Lovely man. His wife is a dear friend. Isabella's smile was gentle, deadly. I'll have to mention you next time we have lunch. I'm sure she'd love to hear about your whirlwind romance with Luca. It was a trap. Elena could feel it closing around her, could feel Luca's tension beside her. If Isabella called this Marcus Chen's wife, if she mentioned Elena working there, the whole thing would unravel. I'm sure she would. Elena kept her voice steady. Though Marcus keeps the staff fairly separate from his personal life, professional boundaries and all that. Of course. Isabella's eyes glittered with something that might have been respect. Still, small world. Valentina called them to drinks in the sitting room, and Elena found herself navigating a minefield of questions and assessments. Where did she grow up? What had she studied? How had she ended up in art gallery management? Every answer had to match the folder, had to sound natural, had to convince 4 people who were actively looking for reasons not to believe her. Luca stayed close, his presence both support and performance. He touched her constantly, hand on her back, fingers brushing her arm, casual affection that looked real enough to make Elena's chest ache with how thoroughly they were lying. Marco watched it all from his chair, sipping whiskey and saying little. But his eyes tracked every interaction, every gesture, every moment of hesitation. Dinner was worse. They sat at a table that could have seated 20, close enough to make conversation easy, and far enough apart to make everything feel staged. Elena was seated between Luca and Isabella, with Dante across from her and Valentina holding court at the far end. The food was incredible, course after course of things Elena couldn't pronounce, wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She tried to eat, tried to keep up with conversation that switched between English and Italian without warning, tried not to look as out of place as she felt. So, Elena, Dante leaned forward, his smile predatory. What do your parents think of all this? Marrying into the Moretti family must have been quite the coup. My parents are dead. Ah, yes, Luca mentioned. How tragic. He didn't sound remotely sympathetic. Recent. 6 years for my mother, 8 for my father. The lie came easier now. She'd rehearsed it so many times that the fictional deaths felt almost real, easier than explaining that her actual father was alive but disappearing piece by piece into Alzheimer's fog. And no other family? None that matter. So you're completely alone in the world. How convenient for Luca. Dante! Isabella's voice cut across the table, sharp. Enough. What? I'm just making conversation. You're being an ass, there's a difference. Dante's eyes flashed, but he sat back, picking up his wine glass. Forgive me, Elena. I'm just protective of my brother. I'm sure you understand. Of course. Elena met his gaze without flinching. Family loyalty is important. Is it? You wouldn't know, would you, having no family of your own? The words hit harder than they should have. Elena felt Luca go rigid beside her, felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Dante. Luca's voice was quiet, dangerous. Stop, now. I'm just pointing out you're being deliberately cruel to my wife, in my house, at my table. Luca stood slowly, his hand finding Elena's shoulder. Apologize. Or leave. The room went silent. Even Marco looked up from his plate, interest sharpening his features. Valentina's mouth thinned into a disapproving line. Dante stared at his brother for a long moment, something ugly moving behind his eyes. Then he smiled, raising his glass. My apologies, Elena. That was uncalled for. The apology was as empty as Valentina's earlier condolences, but it broke the tension. Luca sat back down, his hand sliding to cover Elena's where it rested on the table. His fingers threaded through hers, gripped tight enough to ground her. Thank you, she murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. I meant what I said. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. You're not alone in this. The rest of dinner passed in uneasy civility. Conversation flowed around Elena, sometimes including her, often not. She played her part, responded when addressed, smiled at appropriate moments, let Luca guide the interaction with subtle cues she was learning to read. By the time dessert arrived, Elena's face hurt from holding her expression steady. She wanted to escape, wanted to run upstairs and lock herself in that too expensive room and breathe without feeling like every breath was being evaluated. "Elena, dear," Valentina's voice cut through the general conversation. "Would you join me for coffee? I'd love to get to know my new daughter-in-law better." It wasn't a request. Elena looked at Luca, who gave a small nod. Permission or warning, she couldn't tell. "I'd be honored." They moved to a smaller sitting room, just the two of them, and Elena felt like a mouse being invited into the snake's den. Valentina settled into a chair with practiced grace, gesturing for Elena to sit across from her. "You handled Dante well." "Thank you. He's testing you. He'll continue to test you. That's what he does." Valentina accepted a coffee cup from Maria, her movements precise. "My youngest has always been competitive." "With Luca?" "With everyone, but especially Luca." She took a sip, studying Elena over the rim. "So, tell me the truth. How much is my son paying you?" Elena's blood went cold. "I don't understand. Please, I wasn't born yesterday, and I didn't survive 40 years in this family by being naive." Valentina set down her cup with a soft click. "My son doesn't do whirlwind romances. He doesn't do privacy. He certainly doesn't do simple city hall weddings, so I'll ask again. How much is he paying you?" This was it, the moment the whole thing collapsed. Elena could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, could feel the lies crumbling around her. "I love him." The words came out steadier than she felt. "Whatever you think this is, you're wrong." "Am I?" Valentina leaned forward. "Then tell me something only a wife would know. Tell me about my son that I don't already know. Convince me this is real." Elena's mind raced. She barely knew Luca, barely knew anything beyond what they'd rehearsed. But then she remembered the library, the confession about the house, the moment of raw honesty when he dropped his guard. "He hates this place." The words came out quiet. "This house, this life. He's trapped by legacy and expectation and the weight of being your heir. He told me he doesn't know who he is without it, that the house is beautiful and a prison and he can't escape." Valentina's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, recognition or pain. "He told you that?" "He did." "And what did you say?" "I said that sometimes the locks are on the inside of the cage." Silence stretched between them, heavy, with things unsaid. Valentina picked up her coffee cup again, her hands perfectly steady. "You're either an excellent liar or you actually care about him. I haven't decided which." "Does it matter?" "To me?" "Yes." "To Luca?" Valentina's smile was sad. "Probably not. He's good at keeping people at arm's length, even the ones who want to get closer. Even his mother?" "Especially his mother." She set down the cup. "I pushed him too hard when he was young, expected too much. Turned him into someone who doesn't know how to want things for himself, only for the family, for the business, for the legacy." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you're real, you should know what you're dealing with. And if you're not real," Valentina's eyes went hard, "you should know that I will destroy you if you hurt him." "I'm not going to hurt him." "Everyone hurts him eventually. That's what happens when you can't let people close enough to matter." Valentina stood, smoothing her skirt. "You can go. I'm sure you're exhausted from all this performance." Elena stood on shaking legs, heading for the door. She paused at the threshold. "For what it's worth, I think he's worth caring about, even if he doesn't believe it himself." "Then prove it." Valentina's voice followed her into the hallway. "Show him he's more than just the legacy, more than just the heir. Actually see him." Elena made it halfway to the stairs before Dante appeared from a side hallway, blocking her path. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his tie, and the civilized veneer from dinner had cracked to reveal something hungrier underneath. "That was quite the performance at dinner." "I don't know what you mean." "The loving wife act. The way you looked at my brother like he hung the moon." Dante moved closer, and Elena's instinct screamed at her to run. "But I know Luca, and whatever this is, it's not love." "You don't know anything about us." I know he's never brought a woman home before. I know he got married without telling his family. I know, Dante's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, that you're hiding something. Let go of me. Or what? You'll tell Luca. His grip tightened. He's not here to protect you right now. It's just you and me. So why don't you tell me the truth? What's he paying you? What do you get out of this arrangement? Elena tried to pull away, but Dante's fingers were iron around her wrist. Fear spiked through her, sharp and chemical. This was what Luca had warned her about. This was Dante testing boundaries, pushing to see how far he could go. I said let go. Make me. She doesn't have to. Luca's voice came from behind Dante, cold as winter. I will. Dante released Elena's wrist immediately, turning to face his brother. Luca stood in the hallway, and Elena had never seen him look dangerous before. Truly dangerous, the kind of threat that wasn't performed or controlled. He looked like violence waiting to happen. We were just talking. With your hand on my wife's wrist hard enough to leave marks? That's not talking, Dante. That's assault. Don't be dramatic. Get out of my sight. Luca's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Now, before I do something we'll both regret. Dante looked between them, something ugly and calculating in his expression. Then he smiled, all teeth and no warmth. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Luca moved to stand between Dante and Elena, physically blocking his brother. Touch her again and I'll break every finger in your hand. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Dante left, and the moment he was gone, Luca turned to Elena, his hands gentle as they examined her wrist. Red marks were already blooming where Dante had gripped her, and Luca's jaw clenched tight enough that Elena heard his teeth grind. Did he hurt you anywhere else? No, just scared me. I should have been there. I should have... He stopped, something raw crossing his face. I'm sorry. This is my fault. How is your brother being a psychopath your fault? Because I brought you into this. Because I knew what he was capable of, and I didn't protect you. Luca's thumb brushed over the marks on her wrist, careful not to press. I'm going to kill him. Please don't. I'd rather not spend Christmas visiting you in prison. The joke fell flat. Luca looked at her with eyes that were too dark, too intense, too something Elena couldn't name. Are you okay? I'm fine. Shaken, but fine. She pulled her wrist back, cradling it against her chest. Your mother thinks I'm a liar. Your brother thinks I'm a fraud. Your sister is probably investigating my entire background as we speak. This is going great. Elena, I need to go to my room. I need to breathe. I need... Her voice cracked. I need to stop pretending for 5 minutes. Luca looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to fix it, wanted to do something. Instead, he nodded. Go. Rest. I'll handle my family. Elena didn't wait for him to change his mind. She fled upstairs to her room, closing the door and locking it behind her. Her hands were shaking. Her wrist throbbed. And somewhere beneath the fear and exhaustion was anger. At Dante, at Luca for bringing her here, at herself for agreeing to this insane arrangement. She changed into pajamas, washed her face, and was climbing into bed when her phone buzzed. A text from Luca. I'm sorry, for all of it. Elena stared at the message. She should ignore it, should let him sit with his apology without validating it. But her fingers moved before her brain caught up. Your mother asked how much you're paying me. What did you tell her? That I love you. A long pause. Then, did she believe you? I don't know. Did you? Another pause, longer this time. Finally, get some sleep. Tomorrow will be easier. You're a terrible liar. I know, but I'm trying. Elena put the phone down and turned off the light, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the dinner, Dante's hand on her wrist, Luca's face when he'd seen the marks, the way he'd looked ready to commit violence for her, for someone who was supposed to be just a hired actress playing a role. Except it didn't feel like just a role anymore. It felt dangerous and real and terrifying in ways Elena couldn't articulate. She'd come here for money, for survival, for her father. But somewhere between rehearsed touches and honest confessions, between champagne disasters and family warfare, the lines had blurred so completely that Elena couldn't find them anymore. She touched the ring on her finger, the massive diamond that was real, even though the marriage wasn't. In the darkness, it caught whatever light managed to filter through the curtains, throwing tiny rainbows across the ceiling. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow she'd have to face them all again. Tomorrow the performance would continue. Tonight she let herself admit the truth she'd been avoiding since dinner. She cared about him, about Luca, about the man who hated his prison house and bought her father nursing care and looked at her like she was worth protecting. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Elena woke to someone knocking on her door, soft, persistent, refusing to be ignored. She checked her phone, 6:30 in the morning on Christmas Day. For a moment she considered pretending to be asleep, but the knocking continued. "Elena," Luca's voice muffled through the wood. "I know you're awake. Open the door." She climbed out of bed, still in pajamas, and unlocked the door. Luca stood in the hallway holding 2 coffee cups, dressed in running clothes that somehow still looked expensive. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. "It's 6:30. I know what time it is." He held out a cup. "Coffee. Peace offering." Elena took it, the warmth seeping into her palms. "For what?" "Yesterday. Dante, my family, all of it." He leaned against the doorframe, studying her face. "Can I come in?" She should say no. Should maintain boundaries, keep the lines clear between performance and reality. Instead, she stepped back, letting him enter. Luca walked to the window, looking out at gardens dusted with frost. "I talked to Dante last night. Made it clear that if he comes near you again, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that end with him nursing broken bones." He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "He's been told to keep his distance. He will. And if he doesn't, then I'll make good on my promise." Luca turned to face her. "You're under my protection, Elena. That's not just part of the arrangement. That's real." The intensity in his voice made her chest tight. "Why do you care so much? I'm just someone you hired to play a role. Are you?" He moved closer, and Elena found herself backed against the wall without remembering how she got there. Because it stopped feeling like just a role somewhere around the second day. "Luca, I'm not asking you to admit anything. I'm not asking for more than what we agreed on." His hand came up to rest against the wall beside her head, not touching but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "I'm just telling you that this matters. You matter, and I won't let anyone hurt you, family or otherwise." Elena's heart was doing things it had no business doing. "This is a bad idea." "I know. We had a deal, professional, clean, no complications." "I know that too." His eyes searched hers. "Doesn't change anything." "It should." "Probably." He pushed off the wall, putting space between them. "But here we are anyway." Elena took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. "What happens after this? After the 5 days are over and your family goes home and I go back to being Elena Voss instead of Elena Moretti?" "I don't know." The honesty in his voice was raw. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "You're supposed to think everything through. That's what you do. You control variables." "You're not a variable." Luca ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding through his control. "You're a problem I can't solve, a complication I didn't plan for, and I have no idea what to do about it." The admission hung between them, too honest for 6:30 in the morning, too real for a fake marriage. Elena set down her coffee cup before she dropped it. "Your family is going to figure this out. They're going to see right through us. Let them try." His expression hardened. "We've made it this far. We can make it 3 more days. And then what? Then you get your money. Your father gets his care. You get your life back." He said the words like they hurt. "Exactly what we agreed on." "Right." Elena forced herself to sound normal, unbothered. "The deal." "The deal," Luca echoed, and something in his eyes looked like grief. He left before she could say anything else, and Elena stood alone in her room trying to figure out when everything had gotten so complicated. She was supposed to be acting, playing a part, surviving 5 days for $100,000. Instead, she was catching feelings for a man who lived in a different world, who'd bought her time like a commodity, who looked at her like she was the only real thing in a house full of beautiful lies. She showered and dressed in one of the casual outfits Luca had provided, soft cashmere and dark jeans that fit like they'd been tailored for her. Probably had been. The bruises on her wrist had darkened overnight, purple fingerprints that she covered with a bracelet from the jewelry box. Christmas morning at the Moretti estate started with breakfast in the formal dining room. Elena arrived to find the family already gathered. Valentina in a cream silk blouse, Marco reading the paper, Isabella picking at fruit, and Dante conspicuously absent. "Good morning, Elena." Valentina's greeting was civil, if not warm. "I trust you slept well?" "Very well, thank you." "Luca mentioned you'd be joining us for Christmas Mass." Elena's mind went blank. Mass. Church. She looked at Luca, who was pouring coffee with careful precision. "If that's all right," Elena said carefully. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense. You're family now." Valentina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Family attends together." Elena survived Mass by staying quiet and following Luca's lead. The church was old and beautiful, filled with people who knew the Moretti name and watched Elena with undisguised curiosity. She felt their stares, felt their speculation, felt the weight of being the mysterious wife who'd appeared from nowhere. Luca's hand found hers during the service, fingers threading through hers in a gesture that looked casual but felt anchoring. Elena held on tighter than she should have, grateful for something solid in the sea of strangers. "You're doing fine," he murmured during a hymn. "Just breathe. Your mother is going to murder me in my sleep. She wouldn't be that obvious. Poison, maybe. Mysterious accident, but never anything traceable." "That's not reassuring." "Wasn't meant to be, just honest." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. 2 more days. You can survive 2 more days." After church came the real torture, Christmas dinner preparation. Valentina insisted Elena help in the kitchen, which felt like a test Elena was doomed to fail. She didn't know how to make traditional Italian dishes, didn't know family recipes or cooking techniques, or anything beyond basic restaurant prep work. "You've never made ossobuco?" Valentina's voice dripped disbelief. "My mother died when I was young. I didn't learn much traditional cooking." It was partially true, her mother had died, though not young enough that Elena hadn't learned to cook. But the lie came easier now, smoothed by repetition and desperation. Valentina's expression softened fractionally. "I see. Well, you'll learn. A Moretti wife should know how to feed her family properly." Isabella appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching the interaction with quiet attention. "Mama, stop terrorizing the poor girl. Not everyone grew up in your kitchen." "I'm not terrorizing. I'm teaching." "Same thing in this house." Isabella moved to stand beside Elena, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Don't worry. She made all of us suffer through cooking lessons. You're getting the abbreviated version." "How generous." Isabella smiled, and for the first time Elena saw warmth in it. "You handled Dante well yesterday. That takes spine. Or stupidity. In this family, they're often the same thing." She lowered her voice, glancing at Valentina, who'd moved to the stove. "Fair warning, he's planning something. I don't know what, but he's been on his phone all morning, making calls." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that usually end with someone getting hurt." Isabella's eyes met hers, serious. "Watch your back. And don't trust him if he suddenly starts being nice." Before Elena could respond, Dante himself walked into the kitchen, showered and dressed and wearing a smile that made her skin crawl. "Ladies, Merry Christmas." He moved to kiss Valentina's cheek, pointedly ignoring Elena. "What can I do to help?" "You can stay out of my kitchen," Valentina said without looking up. "You're useless with food." "Harsh, Mama. I have many talents." "None of them involving cooking." She waved him away. "Go bother your father." Dante left, but not before shooting Elena a look that promised their conversation wasn't over. She felt Isabella tense beside her, saw the older woman's jaw tighten. "He's going to push until something breaks," Isabella murmured. "That's what he does. Finds the cracks and widens them." "Why are you warning me?" "Because I like you, or at least I like that you make Luca act human for once." Isabella passed Elena a bowl. "And because Dante has been trying to undermine Luca for years. If you're real, and I'm still not convinced you are, then you're a threat to whatever plan he's working on. And if I'm not real," Isabella's smile was sharp, "then you're an even bigger threat, because it means Luca is desperate enough to fake a marriage, which means he's vulnerable, and vulnerability is currency in this family." Dinner was a production that took hours and filled the formal dining room with more food than 10 people could possibly eat. Elena found herself seated between Luca and his father, with Dante across the table wearing that same unsettling smile. The meal started pleasantly enough. Conversation flowed in Italian and English, stories were shared, Wine was poured. Marco asked Elena about the gallery, questions that were easier to answer because she'd memorized the details so thoroughly. Valentina almost smiled when Elena complimented the food. Then Dante struck. "So, Elena," he set down his wine glass with careful precision. "I was thinking about your gallery. Luminara Arts, you said?" "That's right. Funny thing, I called a friend who works in the financial district, asked if he'd heard of it." Dante's smile widened. He hadn't, so I did some research, looked it up online, checked business registrations, even drove by the address this morning. Elena's blood went cold. Luca went very still beside her. "And?" Isabella's voice cut across the table, sharp. "And there's no Luminara Arts Gallery at that address. There's a coffee shop. Been there for 5 years." Dante leaned back in his chair, triumph written across his face. "So I have to wonder, where exactly do you work, sister-in-law? Or do you work at all?" The table went silent. Valentina's fork clattered against her plate. Marco looked up with renewed interest. Isabella was staring at Dante like she wanted to strangle him. Elena's mind raced, panic clawing up her throat. She'd memorized the story, had practiced it, had believed Luca when he said the details would hold up. But he'd lied, or made a mistake, or... "The Luminara Arts is a subsidiary." Luca's voice was calm, almost bored. "It operates under the parent company's address. Client viewings are by appointment only, in private locations. Elena manages the acquisitions remotely." "How convenient," Dante's eyes glittered. "And this parent company would be? None of your business." Luca's hand found Elena's under the table, squeezing tight. "Elena's career isn't up for discussion at Christmas dinner. I'm just trying to get to know my new sister-in-law. Is that a crime?" "It is when you're clearly trying to embarrass her." Isabella's voice was ice. "What's your game, Dante? What are you trying to prove?" "That our brother married a woman none of us know anything about. That she appeared out of nowhere with a convenient dead family and a job that doesn't seem to exist. That maybe..." He looked directly at Elena. "This whole marriage is a fraud." Luca stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "Outside! Now! Why? Afraid of what else I might find?" "Outside." The word came out deadly quiet. "Or I end this at the table. Your choice." Dante stood slowly, his smile never wavering. "By all means, brother. Let's talk." They left through the side door, and Elena could hear their voices rising in the hallway, Italian cutting through the air like knives. She sat frozen, conscious of everyone staring at her, waiting to see how she'd react. "Elena," Marco's voice pulled her attention. "Is what my son said true?" She met his eyes, seeing Luca's intensity reflected back at her. "Which son?" Something almost like approval flickered across his face. "Good answer." "I work in art acquisition. The details of my employment are confidential due to client privacy." The lie came out smoother than it should have. "Dante can believe whatever he wants." "He usually does." Marco took a sip of wine. "But he's not usually wrong." "There's a first time for everything." "Is there?" His gaze pinned her. "Tell me, Elena, what do you want from my son?" The question was so direct it stole her breath. "I don't understand." "Everyone wants something. Money, power, status. The Moretti name carries weight, and weight attracts people who want to use it." Marco leaned forward. "So what do you want?" Elena thought about lying, thought about crafting an answer that would satisfy him. But something in Marco's eyes said he'd see through anything but truth. "I want him to be happy." The words came out before she could stop them. "I want him to stop feeling trapped by this house and this legacy and the weight of being who you need him to be. I want him to breathe." Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, actually smiled, warm and genuine. Maybe Dante is wrong after all. The door burst open and Luca stormed back in, followed by a furious-looking Dante. Luca's knuckles were red, and Dante had the beginning of a bruise forming on his jaw. "We're leaving." Luca's hand closed around Elena's arm, pulling her to her feet. "Now." "Luca, what? Oh. Now, Elena." She let him lead her out of the dining room, through the hallway, up the stairs. He didn't stop until they were in his room, the master suite she'd been told not to enter, and the door was closed behind them. "What happened?" Elena asked, though the answer was written across his bruised knuckles. He hired a private investigator. Luca paced like a caged animal. Spent the last 2 days digging into your background, found your real address, found your real employment history, found... He stopped, jaw clenching. He found your father. Terror spiked through her. What? He knows about the Alzheimer's, about the debt, about the eviction notice. Luca's eyes were dark with fury. He knows everything, and he threatened to tell the family unless what? Unless you leave, quietly, tonight. He gives you 24 hours to disappear, or he exposes the whole thing. Luca slammed his fist against the wall. I should have killed him when I had the chance. Elena's legs went weak. She sat on the edge of his bed trying to process. He knows. They're going to know. This whole thing is going to collapse. Not if you leave. And if I don't, if I stay and call his bluff, then he destroys you, destroys me, tells my father his dying wish to see me settled was based on a lie. Luca's voice cracked. I've thought through every scenario. There's no way out that doesn't end with someone getting hurt. So we just let him win. We let you survive. He crouched in front of her, hands gripping her knees. This was supposed to be simple. 5 days. $100,000. No one gets hurt. But I didn't count on... He stopped, something breaking in his expression. I didn't count on caring about you. Elena's breath caught. Luca, I know this wasn't part of the deal, but I can't watch him destroy you because of my mistakes. His hands tightened. So you leave. Tonight. I'll transfer the money anyway. You get what you need and you get out before this gets worse. And you? What happens to you? I deal with my family, with Dante, with the fallout. He stood, putting distance between them. I've survived worse. Have you? Elena stood too, anger finally breaking through the fear. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to let your brother destroy something real because you're too scared to fight for it. This isn't real. But his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? She moved closer, closing the space he'd created. When did it stop being fake, Luca? When you defended me to your mother? When you threatened Dante for touching me? When you told me I mattered? Elena, when did you stop performing? She put her hand on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. Because I stopped days ago. This stopped being about money the moment you looked at me like I was worth protecting. You are worth protecting. His hand covered hers, holding it against his heart. That's why you need to leave. And if I don't want to, then you're an idiot. But his other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Because staying means war with my family, means Dante exposing everything, means your father's condition becoming ammunition, means... Elena kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't strategic, just desperate and honest and tired of pretending. Luca froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back like he'd been waiting for permission. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head, deepening the kiss until Elena forgot why this was a bad idea. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. That doesn't solve anything. I know. You should still leave. I know that too. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt. But I'm not going to. Why not? Because I'm tired of running, tired of surviving instead of living, tired of letting people like Dante win because it's easier than fighting. She pulled back enough to look him in the eye. And because you're worth fighting for. Even if you don't believe it. Elena? A knock on the door interrupted whatever he was about to say. Isabella's voice came through, urgent. Luca, we have a problem. Luca opened the door to find his sister standing in the hallway, phone in hand. What now? Dante just sent a photo to the family group chat. She held up the phone, and Elena saw herself, a picture taken outside her apartment building, clearly dated from last week, in work uniform, looking exhausted and poor and nothing like the polished woman currently standing in Luca's bedroom. He's doing it, Isabella said quietly. He's burning it all down. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find messages flooding in, texts from Luca's family, group chat notifications, everything exploding at once. Valentina demanding explanations. Marco asking calm, pointed questions, and Dante sending message after message exposing every detail he'd found. Her real job, her real address, her father's condition, the debt. All of it laid bare for the family to see. "We need to go downstairs." Luca's voice was hollow. "Face this together. Or I could just leave," Elena heard herself say. "Let you tell them I lied. That you didn't know. Save yourself." "No." Luca's hand found hers, fingers threading through. "We face this together, all of it." They went downstairs to find the family gathered in the sitting room. Valentina looked furious. Marco looked disappointed. Isabella looked worried. And Dante stood by the fireplace wearing a victorious smile. "Ah, the happy couple." Dante's voice dripped sarcasm. "Ready to explain why my brother's wife is actually a waitress drowning in debt who apparently needed money badly enough to pretend to be in love?" Valentina stood, her voice shaking. "Luca, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't fake a marriage. Tell me you didn't lie to your dying father about finding someone." Luca's hand tightened on Elena's. "I can't tell you that." The words fell like stones. Valentina's face went white. Marco's expression hardened into something carved from granite. "How much did you pay her?" Dante asked, enjoying every second. "What was the price tag on this little performance?" "Enough." Luca's voice was quiet but absolute. "Enough to give her father proper care. Enough to keep them from being evicted. Enough that she wouldn't have to choose between medication and food. So you bought her like a—" "Finish that sentence and I'll break your jaw." Luca stepped forward, putting himself between Dante and Elena. "She's not what you're implying. She never was." "Then what is she?" Valentina demanded. "What is this, Luca? Some kind of business transaction?" "It started that way." Luca's voice was raw. "I needed a wife to get you off my back, to show Papa I could commit to something, to stop the endless parade of appropriate women from appropriate families." He looked back at Elena, "but it stopped being fake somewhere along the way." "How convenient," Dante sneered. "Fall for the help. Very romantic. She's not the help." Luca's voice went dangerous. "She's the first real thing I've had in this house full of beautiful lies. The first person who saw me instead of the legacy. The first—" He stopped, something breaking in his expression. "The first person I wanted instead of needed." Silence filled the room. Elena stood frozen, his words echoing in her head. Valentina sank back into her chair, looking suddenly old. Marco studied his son with unreadable eyes. "So what now?" Isabella asked quietly. "What happens next?" "Now I make a choice." Luca turned to face his family fully. "I choose her. Real marriage or fake, money involved or not, I choose Elena. And if that means you cut me out of the family, if that means losing the business, if that means—" "Stop!" Marco's voice cut through the room. "Just stop." He stood slowly moving to the bar to pour whiskey with steady hands. He took a sip, studying Luca with those dark Moretti eyes. "Your brother is right about one thing. You lied. To all of us. On Christmas. While I'm dying." He let that sink in. "That's unforgivable." "Papa, I'm not finished." Marco took another drink. "But Dante is wrong about something important. He thinks this is about money, about fraud, about some waitress conning my son." He looked at Elena, and she saw Luca in his face. The intensity, the perception, the ability to see through everything. "But I watched you at dinner, watched how you looked at him, how you defended him when I asked what you wanted. And I know desperation when I see it. I built an empire on recognizing it. So you're going to, what, forgive her?" Dante's voice was incredulous. "She lied to us, used Luca, probably planned this from the beginning." "Did she?" Marco turned to Elena. "Did you plan this? Did you seduce my son for his money?" Elena could lie, could craft an answer that would satisfy them. But she'd spent 5 days performing, and she was tired of it. "I spilled champagne on him in a restaurant. I thought my life was over. He offered me money to pretend to be his wife for 5 days, and I was desperate enough to say yes." She met Marco's eyes. "I didn't plan anything. I didn't want this. I just wanted to survive long enough to take care of my father. And now? Now I want—" Elena's voice caught. She looked at Luca, at the man who'd bought 5 days of her life, and somehow become more important than the money. "Now I want things I have no right to want." Like what? Like him, like this, like a life that isn't just survival. She forced herself to look at Marco. But I understand if that's not possible. I'll leave. Tonight. You'll never hear from me again. Will you? Marco's eyes shifted to his son. What do you think, Luca? Will she leave if you ask her to? Yes. Luca's voice was hollow. She'll leave because she thinks it's what's best for me. That's who she is. She sacrifices. And you, will you let her go? The question hung in the air. Elena held her breath, waiting. No. Luca's hand found hers again, gripped tight enough to hurt. I won't. Not anymore. Not when I finally found something worth keeping. Marco smiled, actually smiled, warm and sad and knowing. Good. Because a man who'll lose everything for a woman who's worth it? That's a man who understands what matters. He turned to Dante. Your brother just chose love over legacy, over money, over the approval of his family. That takes more courage than you'll ever have. Dante's face went purple. You can't be serious. You're going to just accept this? Accept that he faked a marriage, lied to you while you're dying? I'm accepting that my son finally chose something for himself instead of for the family, for the business, for me. Marco's voice was tired. I'm dying, Dante. And watching my boys fight over scraps of power while missing everything that actually matters. That's the real tragedy. He turned to Elena, and his expression softened. You love him. It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Elena thought about lying, about hedging, about protecting herself. Then she looked at Luca and saw everything she'd tried not to feel reflected in his eyes. Yes, the word came out steady. I didn't mean to, didn't want to, but yes. Then you have my blessing. Marco raised his glass. Fake marriage or real, money involved or not, you have more honesty between you than most couples who start with love. Build on that. Make it real. Make it last. Valentina made a choked sound, but she didn't argue. Isabella was smiling, and Dante looked like he wanted to set something on fire. This isn't over, he said, voice shaking with rage. You think you can just... It's over, Dante. Luca's voice was flat. You lost. Accept it. I'll destroy you, both of you. I'll make sure everyone knows that my son found love with a woman who needed help, that he paid her to play a role and ended up meaning it. Marco's laugh was bitter. Go ahead. Tell the world. See who cares. Dante stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence he left behind was deafening. Luca pulled Elena close, his face buried in her hair. I'm sorry for all of it. Stop apologizing. I brought you into this mess. Almost cost you everything. You saved me. Elena pulled back enough to see his face. You gave me a chance when I had none left. You protected me. You chose me. Of course I chose you. His hand cupped her face. You're the only real thing in my life. Valentina stood abruptly. I need air. This is too much. She left, and Isabella followed after squeezing Elena's shoulder. Marco finished his whiskey, studying them with knowing eyes. 3 more days until New Year's. Make them count. He headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. And Elena? Welcome to the family. Really, this time. Then they were alone in the sitting room, still holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a world that had just tilted sideways. What now? Elena whispered. Now we figure out what real looks like. Luca's forehead touched hers. Now we stop pretending and start choosing. I'm still getting paid, right? He laughed, the sound breaking something loose in his chest. You're mercenary to the end. I have bills, and your family is terrifying. I deserve hazard pay. Fair point. His arms tightened around her. Stay. Not for the money, not for the deal. Just stay. Elena thought about her apartment, her father, her old life of just surviving. Then she thought about this. Luca's arms around her, his family cautiously accepting her, the possibility of something more than just getting by. Okay, she said it simply. I'll stay. Yeah? Yeah. Elena kissed him, softer this time, like a promise. But I want a real proposal eventually, with a ring I actually get to pick out. Deal. Luca smiled against her mouth. Though, fair warning, I'm keeping the one I gave you. It looks good on you. It's growing on me. They stood there in the sitting room, holding on to each other while the house settled around them, and somewhere upstairs Dante probably plotted revenge, and Valentina tried to process her son's choices, and Marco smiled knowing he'd lived long enough to see Luca finally choose himself. It wasn't perfect, wasn't clean, wasn't the fairy tale ending people wrote about, but it was real. And for two people who'd spent too long performing, real was enough. They stayed in the sitting room until the fire burned down to embers, neither quite ready to face the rest of the house. Elena's head rested on Luca's shoulder, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. It felt dangerously domestic, this quiet aftermath of chaos. "Your mother is never going to forgive me," Elena said finally. "She'll come around. She always does." Luca's voice rumbled through his chest. Give her time to process that her carefully controlled son just chose chaos over convenience. "Is that what I am? Chaos?" "You're the best kind of chaos. The kind that makes everything else make sense." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Besides, my father likes you. That counts for more than my mother's approval." "Your father is dying." "Which means his opinion matters most." Luca's voice tightened. "He doesn't have time to waste on politeness. If he says you're good for me, he means it." Elena thought about Marco's tired eyes, the way he'd looked at her like he saw something worth keeping. "How long does he have?" "Months, if we're lucky. Weeks, if we're not." Luca's hand stilled on her arm. "He refused treatment, said he'd rather have quality time than quantity. Very Marco Moretti, stubborn until the end." "I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived exactly the life he wanted. Built something from nothing. Left a mark." Luca's voice went quiet. "I just wish I'd figured out what I wanted before he ran out of time to see it. He saw it tonight." "Yeah." Luca pulled her closer. "He did." They eventually made their way upstairs, but instead of separating to their respective rooms, Luca pulled Elena into the master suite. She'd never been inside before. It was all dark wood and expensive fabrics, masculine and controlled, just like him. A king bed dominated the space, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens where frost glittered under moonlight. "I should probably go to my room," Elena said without conviction. "Probably." Luca's arms circled her waist from behind. "But I'd rather you stayed. Your family will know." "My family already knows everything. Might as well be comfortable." He turned her to face him. "Unless you want space. I can be a gentleman if required." Elena thought about going back to her empty room, about lying awake alone, trying to process everything that had happened. Then she thought about staying here, about falling asleep next to someone who'd chosen her despite every reason not to. "Gentleman is overrated," Luca smiled, real and unguarded. "Good, because I'm not very good at it anyway." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in years, Elena didn't dream about drowning. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Luca already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That's creepy," she mumbled, still half asleep. "You snore." "I do not." Little snuffling sounds. Very cute. He brushed hair from her face. "I ordered breakfast. Maria's bringing it up." "To your room?" "To our room. If you're staying, you're staying. No more pretending we're in separate spaces." His hand cupped her jaw. "Unless you want separate spaces." Elena thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "No, this works." "Good." He kissed her, morning breath and all, like he'd been waiting for permission. "Because I'm not letting you go now." Maria arrived with a loaded tray, her expression carefully neutral as she took in Elena clearly having spent the night. "Breakfast, Mr. Moretti. Will you be joining the family this morning?" "Eventually, after coffee. Your mother asked me to tell you she expects both of you at brunch. 10 o'clock, sharp." Maria set down the tray. She was quite insistent. After Maria left, Elena groaned. "Facing your mother sounds worse than facing Dante. At least Dante is predictable. My mother is strategic." Luca poured coffee, handing her a cup. "But we survived last night. We can survive brunch." They dressed in comfortable silence, Elena borrowing one of Luca's shirts because her clothes were still in the other room. It hit her mid-thigh and smelled like him, and when Luca saw her in it, something heated in his eyes. Keep looking at me like that and we're going to be late for brunch. Would that be so terrible? Your mother will kill us both. Fair point. He forced himself to look away. Later. We'll revisit this later. Brunch was tense but civil. Valentina presided over the table like a general directing troops, her expression giving nothing away. Isabella smiled encouragement whenever their mother wasn't looking. Marco ate slowly, saving his energy, but his eyes were sharp when they landed on Elena. Dante was conspicuously absent. Your brother left early this morning, Valentina said, noticing Luca's scan of the room. Said he had business in the city. Good riddance, Isabella muttered. Isabella! Valentina's voice carried warning. He's still family. Family doesn't try to destroy each other for sport. Doesn't it? Marco's dry comment drew everyone's attention. I seem to remember you and Dante going through a phase where you communicated exclusively through sabotage. I was 12, and he deserved it. He put frogs in your designer purse. After I told his girlfriend he was cheating on her, Isabella smiled at the memory. Which he was. Both of you were nightmares. Valentina's expression softened fractionally. Though I suppose that's normal for siblings. Elena listened to the family dynamics play out, feeling like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. Her own family had been small, just her and her parents, and after her mother died, just her and a father who was slowly disappearing. This chaos of siblings and power plays and old grudges was entirely foreign. Elena. Valentina's voice pulled her from her thoughts. May I speak with you, privately? It wasn't really a request. Elena followed Valentina to a small sitting room off the main hallway, her stomach tight with nerves. Valentina settled into a chair with practiced grace, gesturing for Elena to sit across from her. I owe you an apology. Elena blinked. I'm sorry? I judged you harshly, made assumptions about who you were and what you wanted from my son. Valentina's hands folded in her lap, perfectly composed. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong. I did accept money to pretend to be his wife. Yes, but you also stayed when it became dangerous, stayed when my son gave you an out, stayed when Dante exposed everything and leaving would have been easier. Valentina's eyes met hers. That's not the behavior of someone using him. I care about him. I know. I watched you last night. Watched how you looked at him when Marco gave his blessing. You weren't relieved about the money or the approval. Valentina leaned forward slightly. You were relieved for Luca. That's love, whether you want to call it that or not. Elena's throat tightened. It's complicated. Love usually is, especially in this family. Valentina's smile was sad. I married Marco when I was 22. My parents arranged it. Good Italian family, strong connections. Everyone approved. I didn't love him, didn't even like him at first. But over time, through all the complications and the business and the children, we built something real. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that how it starts doesn't matter as much as what you do with it. You and Luca started with a transaction, but what you build from here, that's what counts. Valentina stood, smoothing her skirt. Give him room to be human, to fail, to be something other than the perfect heir. He needs that more than he needs perfection. I'm not sure I know how to do perfect anyway. Good. Perfect is boring. Perfect is what I tried to make him, and it nearly broke him. She moved toward the door, pausing. Also, for what it's worth, I'm glad he chose you. I was starting to worry he'd choose the business over everything else, like his father did. After Valentina left, Elena sat alone trying to process the conversation. An apology. Approval. However cautious. Permission to be imperfect. It felt like more than she'd earned, more than she deserved after lying to them all. Luca found her there 20 minutes later. My mother didn't kill you. That's promising. She apologized. She what? Apologized for judging me. Said I was good for you. Elena looked up at him. Is your mother usually this reasonable? Never. This is unprecedented. Luca pulled her to her feet. What did you do to her? Existed, I guess. Loved you, stayed when it was easier to run. All very dangerous things. His arms circled her waist. Keep doing them anyway. The next 2 days passed in a strange sort of domestic peace. Dante stayed away, either plotting revenge or licking his wounds. Valentina thawed incrementally, even smiling when Elena successfully made pasta under her direction. Isabella dragged Elena shopping, claiming she needed proper family clothes and ignoring Elena's protests about the cost. "Luca can afford it," Isabella said, tossing another dress onto the growing pile. "Besides, consider it back payment for putting up with our family. Combat pay." Marco spent most of his time in the library, conserving energy, but he'd call Elena in occasionally to ask about her father, about art, about nothing important. She realized he was just enjoying conversation with someone who didn't have an agenda beyond talking. "My son is lighter with you around," he said one afternoon, whiskey in hand. "I haven't seen him laugh like that in years." "He doesn't laugh much?" "He forgot how. Too busy being who I needed him to be instead of who he wanted to be." Marco's expression turned thoughtful. "That's my fault. I pushed too hard, expected too much, turned him into something efficient instead of something happy." "He's both, can be both. Maybe with you, he can be." Marco raised his glass. "To second chances, however they come." New Year's Eve arrived with fresh snow and a tension Elena couldn't quite name. The original agreement was 5 days, Christmas through New Year's. After tonight, the deal was technically complete. She'd survived, earned her money, could walk away. Except she didn't want to. And judging by the way Luca had been holding her tighter, touching her more often, looking at her like she might disappear, he didn't want her to leave either. But wanting wasn't the same as having a plan. They dressed for dinner, Elena in a dress that Isabella had insisted she needed, Luca in a suit that made him look dangerous and expensive. They'd be celebrating at the house, just family, none of the society nonsense that usually marked Moretti New Year's parties. Elena was fixing her earrings when Luca appeared in the doorway, watching her with that unreadable expression again. "What?" she asked. "Marry me." She nearly dropped the earring. "What?" "Marry me. For real this time. No contract, no money, no performance." He crossed the room, taking her hands. "Just you and me choosing this, choosing each other." "Luca, we've known each other for less than a week." "I know. It's insane. Impractical. Probably a terrible idea." His grip tightened. "But I don't care. I want you. I want this. I want to stop pretending that this is temporary when everything in me says it's not." Elena's heart was doing acrobatics. "Your family already knows the truth, already gave their blessing. My father would probably throw a party if he had the energy." Luca pulled her closer. "The only person whose answer matters is yours." "This is crazy." "I know. We barely know each other. We know the important things. I know you sacrifice yourself for people you love. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you make me want to be something other than the air." His forehead touched hers. "I know that I've never felt this before, this certainty that someone is worth keeping. And if it doesn't work, if we crash and burn, then we crash together." His hands cupped her face. "But I'd rather crash with you than coast safely alone." Elena thought about her apartment, her old life, the safety of known struggles. Then she thought about this. Luca's hands on her face, his family cautiously welcoming her, the possibility of building something real from a foundation of lies. "You're supposed to have a ring," she said finally. "When you propose, that's how it works." "I gave you a ring already." "That was for the fake marriage. Then pick a new one. Anyone you want. I don't care if it costs a fortune or comes from a vending machine." His eyes searched hers. "I just want your answer." Elena kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his mouth. "Yes, you idiot. Obviously, yes." Luca's laugh was relief and joy combined. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around like they were in some cheesy romantic movie instead of a bedroom in a house full of dangerous people. "We're still getting you a new ring. Fine, but I'm picking it out, and it better not be ridiculously expensive." "It's going to be ridiculously expensive. Accept it now." They made it downstairs to find the family already gathering for dinner. Luca kept Elena's hand in his, leading her to the center of the room where everyone could see them. "We have an announcement," he said, and the room went quiet. "Elena and I are getting married. For real this time. Properly. with all of you there to witness it." Isabella squealed and launched herself at Elena. Valentina's eyes filled with tears she'd never admit to, and Marco raised his glass, smiling like he'd orchestrated the whole thing. "Finally," he said. "Took you long enough. We've known each other a week, Papa. I knew within a day of meeting your mother. Time doesn't matter when you know." He gestured them closer. "Come here, both of you." They approached, and Marco gripped Luca's shoulder with one hand, taking Elena's with the other. "You take care of each other? Not perfectly. Perfect is boring. But honestly, when he's trapped in his head, you pull him out." He looked at Luca. "When she's drowning in responsibility, you remind her she's allowed to breathe. Build something better than what I built. Something that doesn't cost so much." "Papa, I'm not finished." Marco's voice was firm despite his weakness. "I'm proud of you. For choosing this. For choosing her. For finally choosing something for yourself instead of for the legacy." He pulled them both closer. "Be happy. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Not the business, not the empire. Just happiness." Dinner was celebration and bittersweet in equal measure. Marco faded halfway through, Isabella helping him to his room while Valentina tried not to show how worried she was. But before he left, he'd laughed at Luca's jokes and toasted Elena's addition to the family and looked more content than Elena had seen him. They rang in the new year on the terrace, champagne in hand, watching fireworks bloom across the distant city. Luca's arms wrapped around Elena from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her ear. "About which part? The champagne disaster? The fake marriage? Falling for you despite my better judgment?" "Any of it." Elena thought about the question seriously. 5 days ago, she'd been drowning, barely surviving, watching her life collapse in slow motion. Now she was standing in a multi-million-dollar estate, engaged to a man she'd met by dousing him in alcohol, surrounded by a family that terrified and welcomed her in equal measure. "No," she said finally. "No regrets." "Good." Luca's arms tightened. "Because I'm keeping you." Possessive. "You have no idea." They stayed on the terrace until the fireworks ended and the champagne was gone and the cold drove them back inside. The house was quiet, everyone having retreated to their rooms. Luca led Elena upstairs, not to the master suite, but to her original room. Why here? Because this is where it started feeling real. This room. You in those pajamas looking terrified and defiant in equal measure. He pushed open the door. I wanted to remember that. The room looked exactly as she'd left it. Expensive clothes still hanging in the closet, jewelry box on the dresser. But it felt different now. Less like a stage set and more like a memory of who she'd been before everything changed. I was so scared, Elena admitted. That first night, I thought I'd made the worst decision of my life. And now? Now I think it was the best mistake I ever made. She turned to face him. You were supposed to be a transaction, a means to an end. 5 days and gone. What am I now? Elena considered the question, looking at the man who'd offered her salvation and demanded nothing in return except honesty. The man who'd protected her from his own family, who'd chosen her over legacy, who looked at her like she was worth more than any amount of money. You're home, she said simply. However that happened, however little sense it makes, you're home. Luca kissed her like the words had broken something loose inside him, and they ended up in the expensive bed that Elena had been too nervous to wrinkle that first night. This time, she didn't worry about the sheets or the cost or whether she belonged there. She just let herself have it. Have him. Have this impossible thing they'd built from lies and desperation. Later, tangled in sheets that definitely needed washing now, Luca traced the bruises on her wrist, faded now, but still visible. Dante's fingerprints marking her skin. I should have hit him harder. You broke his jaw. I think that counts. Cracked. I cracked his jaw. There's a difference. His fingers were gentle over the marks. He won't bother you again. I made sure of it. How? Let's just say he understands the consequences of touching what's mine. Luca's eyes met hers, dark and certain. I'm not a good man, Elena. I do things that would horrify you if you knew all the details, but I protect what's mine, always. Should I be worried about what that means? Probably, but you're not, are you? He was right. She should be worried. Should be questioning what kind of man she'd just agreed to marry, what darkness lived underneath the expensive suits and controlled exterior. But all she felt was safe. I should be, she admitted, but I'm not. Does that make me naive or crazy? Both, maybe. His hand cupped her face. But I'll take it. They fell asleep as the sky started to lighten, and Elena dreamed not of drowning, but of flying. The next morning brought practicalities. Elena needed to go home, check on her father, start the process of moving her life to match her new reality. Luca insisted on coming with her, and Elena was too tired to argue. They drove to her apartment in Luca's car, expensive and impractical for her neighborhood, drawing stares from everyone they passed. Elena felt the eyes on them, felt her neighbor's curiosity burning through the windows. Mrs. Chen from next door was sitting on her stoop, and her eyes went wide when she saw Luca. Elena, you didn't tell me you were dating someone. It's new, Elena managed. This is Luca. Luca, this is Mrs. Chen. She's been checking on my father. Actually, the nurse has been checking on him. Mrs. Chen looked between them, confused. The one who showed up 3 days ago. Said you'd arranged full-time care. Luca had the grace to look slightly guilty. Elena elbowed him. You hired a full-time nurse? You were at my house. Someone needed to take care of him. That's... Elena stopped, trying to find words for the tangle of gratitude and frustration. That's incredibly expensive and presumptuous and necessary. It was necessary. Luca's hand found hers. Let me help. Please. You've spent years doing everything alone. Let someone share the weight. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain independence, prove she didn't need rescuing. But the truth was she'd been drowning for so long that having someone throw her a life preserver felt like oxygen. Okay, she said finally. But we're discussing boundaries. You can't just make decisions about my life without telling me. I absolutely can, but I'll try to warn you first next time. They went inside to find her father sitting in his recliner, a woman in scrubs reading to him from a book. He looked better than Elena had seen him in months, clean, alert, actually engaged with what was happening around him. Elena! His face lit up and her heart squeezed. This was one of his good days when he remembered her clearly. Where have you been? I was starting to worry. Working. I told you. Last-minute catering job. The lie came easier now, smoothed by practice. Dad, this is Luca. She hesitated, not sure what to call him. Fiancé felt too soon. Husband felt like a lie. Boyfriend, Luca supplied, extending his hand. It's good to meet you, sir. Her father shook his hand, studying Luca with surprising clarity. You're the one who sent the nurse. I am. Why? Because your daughter was working herself to death trying to take care of you, and I had resources to help. Luca didn't elaborate, didn't make excuses, just stated facts. Her father studied him for a long moment, then smiled. Good. She needs someone looking out for her, spends all her time taking care of everyone else. I've noticed. They stayed for an hour, Elena showing Luca her tiny apartment, her whole life contained in 400 square feet of cramped space. She felt embarrassed by the smallness of it, the way the walls were thin and the carpet was stained and the bathroom door didn't close properly. But Luca looked around like he was cataloging details, not judging them. This is where you've been living? Yes, not exactly the Moretti estate. No, it's better. At her skeptical look, he elaborated. You built this, made it work despite impossible odds, kept your father safe and fed and cared for while barely surviving yourself. His hand found hers. That takes more strength than inheriting a mansion. It's still a dump. It's your dump. That matters. He pulled her close. But you don't have to stay here anymore. Not if you don't want to. Where would I go? Wherever you want. My place. A new place we picked together. Hell, we could get a house with room for your father if that's what you need. Luca's expression was serious. I meant what I said. I'm keeping you. That means all of you, including the parts that come with responsibility and complication. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. You'd really do that? Make room for my father? Of course. He's family now. Luca said it like it was obvious, like taking on her father's care was just part of the package. We'll find a good facility nearby, or keep the in-home care. Whatever works best for him, for you. That's... Elena's voice cracked. That's more than I ever expected. Then you had low expectations. He kissed her forehead. Get used to being surprised. They spent the next week in a whirlwind of logistics. Luca hired movers to pack up her apartment. Elena gave notice at Luminara, the real restaurant, not the fictional gallery. Her manager looked relieved more than anything, probably tired of her calling out for family emergencies. The money hit her account exactly as promised, $100,000 that erased her debt, paid for her father's care, gave her breathing room for the first time in years. Elena stared at the number on her phone screen, trying to make it feel real. It's just money, Luca said when he caught her looking. Just money. Right. Because that's a totally normal amount to just have. It is for me. Get used to it. I don't think I can. Try anyway. He pulled her onto his lap, the laptop she'd been using to job search sliding aside. And stop looking for jobs. You don't need to work if you don't want to. I want to work. I like working. I'm not going to just sit around your mansion eating bonbons. Our mansion, and why not? Sounds relaxing. Luca, fine. Work if you want. But do something you actually enjoy, not just something that pays bills. His hands settled on her hips. Didn't you say you wanted to teach? Kids? Make a difference? Elena had forgotten she'd told him that. That was a dream, not realistic. Why not? Because I'm 28 with student debt and no degree and I have money to pay for school. And you have time now. And there's no reason you can't finish what you started. Luca's expression was serious. Stop limiting yourself based on what you think is possible. Make new possibilities. It was a novel concept, choosing what she wanted instead of what she could afford. Elena turned it over in her mind, testing the edges. I'd have to go back to school, get certified. It would take years. So? We have years. You'd really support me through that? Elena. Luca turned her to face him fully. I would support you through anything. That's what this means. That's what I'm offering. Not just money, not just resources. Actual partnership. She kissed him instead of answering because words felt inadequate for the size of what he was offering. They got married on a Tuesday in March, 3 months after New Year's. Not a big wedding, just family and a handful of close friends and a small ceremony that felt real in a way the first fake one never had. Elena wore a dress she'd actually picked out, simple and elegant and hers. Luca wore a suit that made him look like he was about to sign business deals instead of marriage certificates, but his hands shook when he slipped the ring on her finger. The ring she'd picked, not as massive as the first one, but more meaningful. A sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, blue like the dress she'd worn that first night at his house. Better than the fake one? Luca asked. So much better, because it's real. Marco was too weak to attend, but they'd had a small ceremony in his room the day before, unofficial but meaningful, letting him see his son actually marry the woman who'd changed everything. He'd smiled through the whole thing, holding Elena's hand afterward. Take care of him, he'd said. He'll try to work himself to death if you let him. Don't let him. I won't. And let him take care of you. He needs to be needed. Sounds like you both do. Marco's grip tightened. Thank you for showing him he's more than just the legacy. He died 2 weeks later, quietly in his sleep, surrounded by family. The funeral was massive, hundreds of people showing up to pay respects to Marco Moretti, the man who'd built an empire. But in the family section, it was just them. Valentina, Luca, Isabella, Elena, even Dante, who'd shown up looking subdued. Luca didn't cry at the funeral. Didn't show emotion beyond quiet acceptance. But that night, alone in their bedroom, their actual shared bedroom in the house that was slowly becoming home, he broke down in Elena's arms. I never told him thank you, he said against her shoulder, for letting me choose you, for supporting this, for giving his blessing. He knew, trust me, he knew. How can you be sure? Because he told me. 2 days before he died, he pulled me aside and said watching you choose happiness was the best gift you could have given him. Elena held him tighter. He was proud of you, so proud. Luca cried harder, years of holding everything together finally breaking loose. Elena just held him, offering presents instead of platitudes, understanding that sometimes grief needed space to exist. In the morning, he'd be the heir again, the strong one, the one making decisions and handling the business and being who everyone needed. Tonight, He could just be human. Valentina surprised everyone by thriving after Marco's death. Instead of collapsing, she threw herself into charity work and family management, becoming the backbone that held everyone together. She and Elena developed an unlikely friendship built on honesty and mutual respect. "You're good for him," Valentina said one afternoon over coffee. "He smiles now, laughs, takes vacations without his laptop. He's still a workaholic, but a manageable one. Before you, he was drowning in responsibility. Now he knows how to surface for air." Valentina's expression softened. "That's your gift to him. Permission to be imperfect." Isabella became Elena's closest ally, the sister she'd never had. They went shopping, grabbed lunch, complained about the men in their family over wine. When Elena nervously admitted she was thinking about going back to school, Isabella had been her loudest cheerleader. "Do it, absolutely do it. And if Luca gives you any grief, I'll handle him." He's been supportive, actually. "Of course he has. You've domesticated him completely. It's adorable and slightly nauseating." Even Dante came around eventually. Not warmth exactly, but a grudging respect. He'd apologized stiffly at Marco's funeral, admitting he'd been wrong to try to destroy what Luca had found. They'd never be close, but they stopped being enemies. "You won," Dante said simply. "Fair and square. I can accept that. I wasn't trying to win anything." "I know. That's why you did." He'd extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Elena. Really, this time." Elena started school that fall, taking classes to finish her teaching certification. It was strange being back in a classroom, strange being older than most of her classmates, strange having the luxury to focus on learning instead of survival. But it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. Luca would quiz her on child development theories while they made dinner, would listen to her practice lesson plans and offer feedback, would celebrate every good grade like it was a major business victory. "You're a nerd," she told him after he'd thrown an actual party for her getting an A on a difficult exam. "I'm proud of you. There's a difference. It's one test. It's proof you're becoming who you wanted to be. That's worth celebrating." Her father's condition stabilized with proper care. He had more good days than bad, and on the good days, he'd ask about school and Luca and whether Elena was happy. She could always answer yes honestly, which felt like its own kind of miracle. 2 years after that first Christmas disaster, Elena stood in front of her first classroom of second graders, nervous and excited in equal measure. The room was bright with decorations she'd stayed up late making, student names on colorful labels, everything ready for the chaos of teaching. Luca had wanted to come for her first day, but she'd convinced him that a wealthy businessman hovering would terrify the children. He'd settled for an enormous bouquet of flowers delivered to the classroom and a text that read, "You're going to be amazing. I'm so proud of you." She was amazing. Nervous and imperfect and making mistakes, but connecting with the kids in ways that felt natural. By the end of the first week, she came home exhausted and happy. "How was it?" Luca asked, pulling her into his arms. "Hard, wonderful, terrifying, perfect." Elena leaned into him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making this possible. For believing I could do it when I didn't believe in myself. You did this. You studied, you worked, you showed up." His hand cupped her face. "I just made sure nothing stopped you." They'd settled into a life that balanced both their worlds, his business commitments and her teaching, his family obligations and her quiet need for normalcy. The house stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like home, especially after they renovated a wing to include a suite for Elena's father and space for her to work. On their third Christmas together, the real anniversary of when everything started, Luca took Elena back to Luminara restaurant, the same place where she'd spilled champagne on him, where he'd made an insane offer, where everything had begun. They sat at table 12, the VIP section, and Elena felt the surreal loop of history. "Remember this?" Luca asked. "Hard to forget. I thought my life was ending." "It was. Just not the way you expected." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Different question this time. Different offer. I already married you. Twice, technically. Not that kind of offer." He pulled out a small box, and Elena's heart started doing gymnastics. Inside were keys. "Our offer. A choice. We can stay in the family house, keep living in Marco's legacy. Or," he pushed the keys across the table, "we can start fresh. New house. Our house. Something we build together instead of inheriting. Elena stared at the keys, understanding the weight of what he was offering. The Moretti estate was his legacy, his responsibility, the symbol of everything his father had built. Walking away from it would be walking away from tradition, from expectation, from the careful control that had defined his whole life. You'd really leave? For you, for us, in a heartbeat. His eyes held hers. I've spent my whole life living in someone else's vision. I want to build something that's ours, something that doesn't come with ghosts and obligations. What about the business? I can run it from anywhere. Technology exists. He smiled. Besides, Dante's been lobbying to take over operations. Let him have it. I'll oversee from a distance and actually have a life. Elena picked up the keys, feeling their weight. Where is it? 20 minutes from here. Big enough for us, your father when he wants to visit, and... He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. Room to grow. If that's something you want, room to grow. Elena repeated the words, understanding the implication. You mean kids? Eventually. Maybe. If you want them. Luca looked uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. I know we haven't talked about it, but I think about it. About you teaching our kids alongside teaching your students. About building something that's just ours. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Happy ones for once. I want that. All of it. Yeah? Yeah. She stood moving around the table to kiss him. Show me our house. They left the restaurant, the same one where they'd met, where champagne had spilled and changed everything, and drove through the city to a house that was beautiful without being overwhelming, modern and warm, with gardens for her father to walk through and space for the life they were building. What do you think? Luca asked as they stood in the empty living room. Elena looked around at the blank canvas, at the possibility of filling it with their choices instead of inherited furniture and expectations. I think it's perfect. I think we can make it home. We already did that, Luca said, pulling her close. We made home out of a 5-day contract in desperation. This is just the next chapter. He was right. Home wasn't the mansion or this new house or any physical location. Home was the man holding her, the life they'd built from lies and champagne and impossible choices. Home was choosing each other every single day, despite every reason not to. They moved in that spring, slowly filling the house with furniture they picked together and memories they made fresh. Elena's father had a suite on the ground floor decorated with photos from when Elena's mother was still alive, when his mind was still whole. He had good days and bad days, but he was safe and cared for and surrounded by love. Valentina visited weekly, bringing food and stories and slowly becoming less about judgment and more about family. Isabella threw them a housewarming party that turned into a regular family dinner tradition. Even Dante showed up occasionally, less hostile and more resigned to his brother's happiness. On a Tuesday in June, Elena came home from school to find Luca in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone, and something was definitely burning. Should I be worried? She asked, dropping her bag. Probably. I'm trying to make the pasta Mama taught us. It's not going well. I can see that. Elena moved to help, but Luca caught her hand. Wait, I have something to tell you. If you burn down our kitchen on week 3 of living here, I'm going to be upset. Not that. Something else. He looked nervous, which was unusual. I sold my stake in the company to Dante. Elena's stomach dropped. You what? He made an offer, a good one. Enough to be comfortable forever without working another day. And I realized, Luca pulled her closer. I realized I don't want to spend my life managing something I inherited. I want to build something new. Maybe start a foundation, focus on charitable work like my father should have done. Actually have time for the life we're building. That's a huge decision. I know, but it's the right one. His hand settled on her hips. I'm done living for the legacy. I want to live for us. Elena kissed him, tasting smoke from whatever he'd burned and possibility from the future they were building. Then let's live, she said. Really live. Not just survive. Deal. Luca smiled against her mouth. Though fair warning, I'm terrible at cooking and mediocre at relaxing, and I'll probably panic about not working within a month. And I'll be there to remind you why you made this choice. Yeah? Yeah. Elena pulled back enough to look at him. That's what we do. take care of each other, pull each other out when we're drowning, remind each other we're allowed to breathe. When did you get so wise? When I stopped being so desperate I couldn't see past survival. She touched his face. You taught me that. You taught me I deserved more than just getting by. They stood in their messy kitchen in their new house, holding each other while something continued burning on the stove, and the life they were building stretched out ahead of them, full of imperfect possibility. 3 years after that first Christmas disaster, Elena got the call she'd been dreading. Her father had slipped away in his sleep, the nurse beside him, peaceful and quiet and gone. She'd known it was coming. The doctors had warned her, the disease progressing despite the best care money could buy. But knowing didn't make it easier. Luca held her through the grief, through the funeral, through the hard weeks of sorting through her father's things and processing that she was alone in the world except for the family she'd married into. You're not alone, he reminded her on particularly hard days. You have me, my mother, Isabella, a whole family that chose you just like you chose us. It's not the same. No, but it's real, and it counts. He was right. It counted. It all counted. The imperfect family dinners, Valentina's advice on handling difficult parents at school, Isabella's insistence on girls' nights when Elena was drowning in grief. It wasn't the family she'd been born into, but it was the family she'd found. And sometimes found family was stronger than blood. On their 5th wedding anniversary, the real one, not the fake Christmas ceremony, Luca surprised Elena with a trip back to the restaurant where everything had started. They sat at table 12 again, older and more settled, the sharp edges of desperation worn smooth by time. 5 years, Elena said, looking at the ring on her finger. Since you made an insane offer to a waitress who'd just destroyed your suit. Best investment I ever made. I was a disaster. You were desperate. There's a difference. Luca raised his glass. To 5 years of making it work. To 5 more. To 50 more, he corrected. At least. Elena smiled, thinking about everything they'd survived to get here. The lies and the truth, the performance and the reality, the contract that had become a marriage that had become a life. I never thanked you, she said suddenly. For what? For seeing me. That first night. When I was invisible to everyone else, you saw me. Elena's voice tightened. You saw someone worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. Elena, Luca reached across the table, taking her hand. You saved yourself. I just gave you room to do it. We saved each other. Yeah. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. I guess we did. They finished dinner and went home to the house they'd built together, to the life they'd chosen despite every reason not to. And if Elena sometimes thought about that first terrified night in the Moretti estate, about the woman she'd been who was drowning in debt and fear, she remembered that woman with gratitude, because that woman had been brave enough to say yes to an insane offer, brave enough to survive 5 days that changed everything, brave enough to choose possibility over safety. That woman had saved her, even if she hadn't known it at the time. And years later, when Elena's students asked why she became a teacher, she told them a simple truth, because someone once believed she could be more than her circumstances, because someone once gave her room to breathe and grow and become. Because sometimes salvation comes wrapped in champagne disasters and impossible contracts and men who see you when you're invisible to everyone else. Because the best love stories start with desperation and build toward choice. And because home isn't a place you're born into. It's people who choose you and keep choosing you every single day after. Elena Moretti, formerly Voss, formerly drowning, now finally gloriously alive, understood that better than anyone.